1, 2, 3. Let's get into the video. Hello everyone, welcome back to book club, which is honestly one of my favorite videos to film, some of my favorite types of videos to film. This channel is all about coffee, books, aesthetic vibes, motivation, and also aesthetic vibes. I mentioned that already, but it's truly the aesthetic that's very important to, I'm sure, a lot of us. I'm so excited because today is the official first actual book club. I know that in August we had a book club, but I was just announcing what the book was going to be for August. But today we are going to be going over and reviewing the August book of the month, which was Reconstructing Amelia. This book is written by Kimberly McCreight. Again, I'm hoping I pronounced her name right. It was a whirlwind. I hope a lot of you were able to read the book as well. If you were, you can skip to this timestamp. I'm going to put it on the screen, or it's also going to be in the description for just my book review. But I'm also going to be giving a summary for people who unfortunately didn't have the time, enough money to buy the book, or whatever their reason was and they weren't able to read the book but still want to know the story and be a part of this. You are welcome here too. So during these summaries, each month I'm going to be doing this, but I also want to include some sort of art project slash painting thing. I find that very relaxing, and I think when I'm telling stories I always like to do something. I thought of maybe doing a puzzle, but a couple days ago I cut these 2x6, a whole stack of them actually. This is my nice stack because I make bookmarks for my Etsy shop. If you guys are interested in checking out anything from my Etsy shop, it is down below. When I'm filming this, I have not posted anything on there yet because I'm still working on my inventory, but feel free to check that out. And also, this is the little inspo for my bookmarks that I will be doing today. It is September, thank the Lord. I've also, if you guys want a little sneak peek, I've made these as well. And these you can find on my Etsy shop. If you don't see them on there yet, just give it a couple days. I'm just working on getting everything together. And I want to make sure when I post everything, I have the inventory to back that up so you guys aren't waiting around for your packages. If you do decide to check it out, some of the inventory from there might be from today's video. So I'm going to be doing that while I'm telling you guys what Reconstructing Amelia was, the whole story and everything. I'm very excited. So let's get into the video. So this book was wild. So Reconstructing Amelia is really interesting. The chapters are written in 4 different perspectives. You have Amelia's perspective, and we already know Amelia is dead. So everything in her perspective is in the past tense. Then we have Kate Barron, who's Amelia's mom. Her chapters are written in 3rd person. And then you have the Facebook posts. So these are very short, just 1 page. I don't even know if you call them a chapter, but it would be Amelia's Facebook post, which was also in the past. And then you have gracefully. Gracefully is spelled with a lowercase g, a lowercase a, and a lowercase e. And then the RCFULLY is in all capitals. So I'll put it on the screen for you guys to be able to see. Gracefully is this anonymous blog, and it spills so much intrusive tea about this school, which is Grace Hall. Grace Hall is the school that Amelia attended. It's this fancy prep school in Brooklyn. Her mom, Kate, works as a lawyer in Manhattan, and so obviously she can afford this fancy school. So the Gracefully blog is not PG. It is rated R. There's curse words in it. It says some pretty vulgar things about the faculty and the students there, you know, calling people names. Women who are even semi-promiscuous are called pretty vulgar things, and it just really dives deep. And the most terrifying part for a lot of the students is that a lot of the times what was said in the blog was not true, but there was a lot of parts that are true. And so people had a hard time figuring out if everything was true or not, because they wanted to believe things weren't true. But then if the blog posted something about them, they realized what they were posting was half true, or sometimes all the way true. And so it created a lot of tension. It was basically very funny for people who weren't being written about, but if you were being written about, it was hard. So the book opens with a Gracefully chapter. It says it's September 5th, and it starts off with, "Hey, beep." insert female dog slur. And it goes into spilling all the tea of what supposedly the faculty professors did. It starts getting into Mrs. Pearl, who's actually the dean of students at Grace Hall. She apparently took on a Latin lover and learned to pole dance over the summer. Mr. Woodhouse, who is also a faculty member at the school, Philip Woodhouse, he apparently spent a weekend with Liv, the English professor, and it's insinuated that things happened. And so you first read this and you're like, okay, this blog is spilling the tea. It's really reaching in there and just being a bully, not a buddy. The next chapter is in Kate's perspective. It is October 24th, and Kate is nervous. She's sitting in this meeting and she knows Victor is not happy. Victor is one of her clients. So as I mentioned before, she is this big hotshot lawyer in Manhattan. She works for a law firm called Sloan and Thayer. And although she lives in Brooklyn because she thinks that the pace there is better suited for her and her daughter because she is a single mother, she does go to Manhattan to work in a very nice building, and she's sitting at 38 years old, having skipped breakfast, staring at the bagels in this meeting room, terrified. And also really nervous. Victor is one of the biggest clients, and he's honestly a bully. He is not happy with her. He's annoyed because the SEC is digging into his company, and honestly, he's kind of insinuating the whole time that Kate is gonna try to undermine him and steal some money from the firm, and he wants everything dated and wants things to make sure that they have their place, and he wants very specific receipts of things and everything he wants very legit, because almost kind of telling her that she's going to steal some money, which is ridiculous. She, in her head, she's like, why would I steal money? That's ridiculous. That would only hurt me and offend Jeremy, who is her boss. And she is actually nicknamed one of Jeremy's favorite disciples. She works hard, and, you know, because of that, Jeremy rewards her and gives her big time clients like Victor. So Kate's sitting in this meeting, listening to his concerns, and she's doing her best to try to manage everything. And then her temp secretary taps her on the shoulder and tells her she has a phone call. And she's mortified because her actual secretary, Beatrice, she was out sick, but she knows she would never do this. And she's sitting there like, oh my gosh, this temp secretary, she's gonna get in trouble. And Victor's already mad, and I didn't even get my bagel. She's thinking, okay, well, the worst thing, I can't not take the call now. So she gets up to go take the phone call. She's going through all these thoughts in her head because she had told her temp secretary, Rebecca, do not come in and bother me, especially with this client, unless it's an absolute emergency. And she's looking at Rebecca, who honestly in her head looks kind of high. Kate even jokes about it. She's like, this girl's probably high. She gets up, she walks over to the corner of the room, and she answers the phone. And she's in her head, she's thinking, okay, who's calling? Is it the judge? I'm waiting to hear back on something for a client. A couple of things are running through her head, all work related. She hears the voice of Mrs. Pearl, who is the dean of students at Grace Hall. And Kate is very upset with herself because she said, oh, it's an emergency, and her thoughts did not go to her daughter. And so she's punishing herself, thinking, oh my gosh, I told her to say an emergency and I didn't even think about my daughter. Mrs. Pearl, in a very annoyed tone, Amelia's okay, but she's been suspended for 3 days. And school policy is that a parent has to come pick her up. And in a kind of condescending voice, she tells her, oh, well, her father is not in the picture, I suppose. And I know you're super busy in Manhattan with your big hotshot job. Okay, she doesn't say it like that, but you need to come pick your daughter up. Kate is flabbergasted. What do you mean suspended? Amelia is not that type of kid. So let me dive into who Amelia is, okay? So Amelia is not a normal 15-year-old girl. She is a super intelligent, she's a perfectionist, she's high achieving, ambitious, bookworm. Her goal is an Ivy League college, and she is more than well prepared to get there. That's a very realistic goal for her. I think a lot of people in the world, their goal is to get into Ivy League colleges, but sometimes they don't really meet the criteria. Amelia met the criteria and surpassed it. Goal-oriented, focused, her grades were fantastic, great record. Honestly, kind of jealous of this girl, and she's fictitious. She just seemed all around like such a perfect candidate for anything she wanted to do in life. The world was her oyster. She could go out there and do whatever she needed to do because she worked her butt off and got where she needed to go. Not only was she super smart, but she also was very athletic. She excelled at field hockey, and she even made sure not just to keep up with athleticism and school, she even volunteered. The girl was crazy. She was doing all these great things, extracurricular activities, volunteering at local soup kitchens and school events like the Harvest Festival. Even though she's an only child and her mom worked a lot, they had a really great relationship. They would have Friday night dinner every Friday. Saturday, they would usually explore somewhere, like a little field trip. They would go to Broadway shows, or they would go to the Cherry Blossom Festival at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. And Sunday was always their movie night. And that was their routine. Yeah, Monday through Friday, her mom usually was working and Amelia's by herself a lot of the time, but they had their thing and they were good and they had such a good bond. And so all of this is rushing to Kate's head and she couldn't comprehend how Amelia had gotten suspended. There's just no way. This doesn't fit in with everything that she knows about her daughter. And Mrs. Pearl just keep insisting, you need to come pick her up. A parent needs to come pick her up. It is school policy, and giving her so much judgment. But Kate was really used to this. I mean, at 24 years old, she got pregnant, unplanned pregnancy, and she got judged straight up. Not just by strangers. Her own mother judged her very hard. They didn't agree with her decision to go through with the pregnancy. They were like, no, career comes first. She was very used to this, so she brushed it off and was like, okay. Told her, I'll be there in 20 minutes. And then while she said that, Victor, who was also in the room, scoffed like, huh, how dare you? What do you mean this meeting is only going to take like 5 more minutes? I have so much to say. The audacity of this man. She brushed Victor off too. There are more important things to worry about right now. And so she was about to ask Mrs. Pearl, what did my daughter do? But then her lawyer brain kicked in and was like, all right, I'm not about to admit and like make my daughter guilty. I'm a lawyer, for goodness sakes. She just casually asked her, what is Amelia being accused of? Mrs. Pearl brushed her off and said, we can't discuss disciplinary issues over the phone. Mr. Woodhouse, the headmaster, he's going to have to provide the detail of everything that's going on. And so Kate goes, okay, I'll be there. She turns around and has to face Victor. Kate does her best to try to get the meeting to end early. He's not having it, so she's forced to call Jeremy, her boss, and she feels really bad that she has to do this because she's supposed to be making his life easier, not harder. But Jeremy is super kind towards her. He tells her, don't worry about it. I just got off the phone giving and praising Amelia for her wonderful abilities and stuff, because she actually is applying to a summer program at Princeton, and they called him for a reference because Amelia had put him down. And he was like, this is not true. The school has to get this wrong. There's no way Amelia would ever get suspended. That's just, even he knew that she wasn't that type of girl. So that made Kate feel a lot better, and she works to start getting to her daughter's school. She gets on the subway because if anyone knows New York City, there's no way you are going to get anywhere quicker than the subway, as long as it doesn't break down. She's on the subway thinking and worrying, just replaying everything that's going on with her and Amelia, because like I said before, they have a really tight connection, very strong bond. But Kate had noticed that Amelia was distant recently. She had changed. Her moodiness went up. Her ability to communicate went down, and they were honestly kind of having some issues, but it wasn't terrible. Kate was sure that they would get over whatever bump was going on, and she just was replaying everything in her head. I mean, what else is she supposed to do? She's sitting on the subway, going to pick up her daughter, who's supposedly suspended, stressed out, has no idea what's going on, and all she could do was keep replaying her last interaction with Amelia, which was very off, because the day before they had had a fight. Amelia had come home and just went off at her mom. She just said, I want to study abroad in Paris. And her mom was like, what? Kate couldn't comprehend what she was saying. You want to study abroad in Paris? You're in high school. What are you even saying? And Amelia just kept repeating and screaming at her, just say yes, mom. Just say yes. And Kate was flabbergasted. She wanted to sit down and talk to her, but she was really late for a meeting and just told her, I can't just say yes. I need time to think about that. They were also having fights because Amelia wanted to know who her dad was. Before, Kate had given her a story that your dad was someone who went off to Ghana to teach children, and that was it. She'd never met him, no contact, nothing. She didn't know anything about him. That really wasn't holding up anymore. Amelia was seeing the holes in that story, and Kate knew it was going to come crashing down soon. And when Amelia was talking about wanting to go study abroad in Paris, she kept kind of hinting, you're never here anyways. Very teenager-esque, and Kate was that hurt because even though she did work a lot, that she had a really good bond with Amelia. She was hoping that Amelia wouldn't see the holes in her life, because since this is the only life she's ever known, maybe she thought this was normal, that parents are gone a lot of the time. She was just worried on the whole subway train there. She was criticizing herself. She kept looking at her watch. It was 45 minutes. Then the train stopped for another 10 minutes. 55 minutes, an hour. The 20 minutes had turned, by the time she got to the school, it had been an hour and 15 minutes. She felt like the worst mother. Kept thinking, I'm the worst mother. Why did I think I could juggle a demanding career and be a single mother? This is terrible. Just really beating herself up. This poor girl. When she finally gets to Brooklyn, specifically the place is called Park Slope, the area in Brooklyn, she sees this mom pushing a stroller and a couple other families around, and she's just looking at them, and she remembered how she never wanted to have an only child. She was an only child, and it was so lonely. She always imagined herself finishing her career, or at least solidifying it very well before she got married, had kids, 2, maybe even 3 kids. Just the whole American dream. She really believed that she would do her career first and then life would come later, and that would be it. And boy, was she wrong. Ended up getting pregnant at 24 in the middle of law school. Kate was thrown. Her mother, Gretchen, was not helpful. She called Amelia an unfortunate situation. Not even a baby. She called her an unfortunate situation. A bump in the road. Something that needs to be taken care of. As in, there's no room for her to be a single mother. Her mom, Gretchen, wanted her Kate to work, do her career, and not have any more unfortunate situations happen. Kate was spiraling. She was thinking about how she did really well in her career, but also lacked in a lot of other areas, specifically romance. I mean, the longest relationship and the healthiest relationship I'd ever had was with a man named Seth, who was so sweet, but then the biggest takeaway he had gotten from being with Kate was that he was gay. So that didn't end up working out. She just didn't really make good decisions with men. That's what she was telling us. We're not sure exactly what yet at this point in the story, but that's what she was telling us. Regardless, Kate did her best. She owes a huge amount of gratitude to Leela, who was Amelia's nanny from since she was little up until recently. In the past couple of months, she had to scale Leela's hours back because Amelia kept saying, I'm too old for a nanny, I'm too old for a nanny. And then Leela's final day came and she moved on, and Kate missed her a lot. And she knew Amelia missed her too, more than she would care to admit. They both missed her so much. She was such a big part of their lives. All these thoughts were swimming around her head until she heard one of the moms say, that's a lot of fire trucks and police cars. And she looked up and she saw a ton of fire trucks with their lights off at the school. Okay, maybe it's a fire drill, a false alarm, because no one really seemed to be in a rush. But as she was getting closer to the school, she realized there are a lot of police officers, ambulances, fire trucks, but they were just sitting there. There wasn't a flurry of people everywhere. And as she was getting closer and closer, she noticed that the police had blocked off a section. And she tried to push her way in, and this police officer stopped her. He told her, ma'am, you can't go through here. And she started explaining, no, my daughter's in there. You have to let me go in. My daughter's in there. They called me. They said that they needed me. I need to go in. And so he told her, like, look, you can't come in. And she said, look, they called me. And he goes, kind of annoyed, okay, what's your daughter's name? And she says, Amelia Barron. Amelia Barron is my daughter's name. So he tells her, okay, I'm gonna go check for you. Just, you can't stay here. You need to go across the street away, okay? And then I'll come find you. So she just nods at him, he goes, and she doesn't listen to him. She keeps walking, goes in more, and she sees about 12 police officers kind of circled around. At first, she couldn't really recognize what it is, this black, flat-heeled object. And at first, she couldn't really see what it was, but then she noticed it was a boot. This boot is just laying on the floor. And she's going in her head, what boots was Amelia wearing? I'm such a terrible mother. I can't even remember what shoes my daughter was wearing when she left this morning. Because after their big fight, the day before, this morning, she was preparing herself. Amelia was gonna have things to say to her. She thought Amelia would be super mad, but no. She was super sweet, walked out of the house, gave her a smile, and just said, bye, Mom, and left. And as she's processing what she's seeing, she turns around, starts to panic very heavily, and there's this big thug, rugged-looking man standing there who has this badge around his neck. He has a very heavy Brooklyn accent, and he introduces himself as Detective Molina. She can tell he's trying to be gentler, that he's usually more rough, but he's being very gentle, and that even makes her panic even more, and she just starts screaming, where's Amelia? What happened? Detective Molina tries to get her to go with him. He grabs her arm, he's trying to pull her inside, and she's not having it. She just keeps refusing, struggling against him, and saying, where's Amelia? In the midst of it all, he tells her, there's been an accident. The chill that runs through Kate is immense, and she just says, but Amelia's okay, right? And you're really just understanding that she's panicking, with good reason. I mean, with all the police officers, fire trucks, ambulances, and the eerie stillness that's going on, she's starting to fall apart. She slowly slides down and balls herself onto the concrete sidewalk, and she just says, but Amelia's okay, right? And he just looks at her, crouches down next to her, and after a long pause, he says, "Your daughter, Amelia, she fell from the roof, Mrs. Barron. She unfortunately didn't survive the fall. We're sorry, but Amelia is dead." And the chapter ends. Oh, I opened up the wrong side of the marker. Yeah, so the story starts off already intense, as you can see. The next chapter right after that is actually told in the perspective of Gracefully, and it's a blog post, obviously. That's what Gracefully is. It says some pretty crazy stuff. First, it talks about a couple of the boys. The post is very sexual in a sense. It talks a lot about people's relationships, and it talks about a new kid named Ian Green. He is from the UK. He's new to that school that year, and it basically is introducing him because he actually does become very pertinent to the story. The post talks about how many people he's going to sleep with this year and how he's already checked off Sylvia Gold, Susan Doyle, another girl, and a couple of other people. How many people is he going to be sleeping with this year? However, Dylan Crosby is not one of them because apparently she's not interested in him and he's been trying. That's what the blog says anyway. Goes on to talk about how Carter Rose, another kid at school, wants to hook up with this one girl, but she's religious and has quote unquote a chastity belt, so she will not be sleeping with him and he needs to lower his hopes. The next chapter is then in Amelia's perspective. This is September 14th. She is walking down her Brooklyn house, her Brooklyn little home that she shares with her mom, and is going over to meet Sylvia, which is her best friend. Now, we have heard of Sylvia before because in the Gracefully post, it introduces Sylvia Gold as one of the girls Ian Green has supposedly slept with. She's running down to meet her, very annoyed. She's wearing these thick jeans because Sylvia is a fashion guru and told her that she needs to wear appropriate clothing if she's going to be seen with her. She said it in a nicer way, I'm assuming, but that's the vibe that you got from that. Like I said before, Amelia is a bookworm, so she's trying to shove her Handmaid's Tale copy into her book bag and rushing down because she's late to meet Sylvia. They've been walking together to school for forever. Amelia, when she was 11, she finally was able to walk to school by herself without her nanny, Leela, because she convinced her mom, since Sylvia's mom had let her at 11. Amelia kind of jokes that her mom, Kate, she kind of doesn't really know how to be a mom. She does her best. She's the most loving person, but she kind of takes her mother and parenting advice based on what other moms do. So whatever Sylvia is allowed to do, she's allowed to do. So if Sylvia can walk to school at 11, her mom says, okay, you can walk to school at 11. So she's hopping down and she sees Sylvia sitting in the corner. She's wearing this very cute outfit, but she's wearing a thick, sleeveless purple sweater. Even though it has sleeves, it's still a very thick sweater, and the girl looks like she's sweating. She looks beautiful, as she always does, Amelia notes, but she's sweating. And she finally gets there and Sylvia's not happy. She's like, what took you so long? And Amelia's like, hey, I'm wearing these jeans, okay, girl? I'm wearing them because you told me to wear them and they're slowing me down. It feels so gross and muddy. It's the second week of September and yeah, it's starting to get colder, but it is not cold enough to be wearing these heavy, heavy jeans yet. Sylvia just looks at her and is like, girl, fashion is beauty, okay? You need to put more importance on your fashion. They get into their usual chatter, you know, boys, things like that. Specifically, Sylvia wants to talk to her about Ian Green. She says, I said hi to Ian yesterday, and Amelia's kind of a little distracted, and Sylvia's like, hello, did you hear what I said? I said hi to Ian Green yesterday. Okay, and what happened? And Sylvia then tells her, he came over to my house and we like totally kissed. And Amelia's not surprised. I mean, Sylvia was beautiful. She was stunning. If she wanted a boy, she'd get a boy. Her problem was not getting the boys. It was, according to Amelia, keeping them, because Sylvia got really obsessed. She was charming, she was mysterious and so fun and chaotic, spontaneous. That's how she described her. She could get any boy she wanted, but then she would become very obsessed and Amelia would be there to pick up the pieces when the boys would end up leaving her in the end. So every guy that Sylvia brought up, she always said the same thing. Maybe he could be the one, and Amelia always knew she's just gonna get obsessed. And the more obsessed she gets, the harder it is gonna be when it inevitably ends. But Amelia wasn't gonna tell her all this. She wanted to be supported, and if this is what her friend believed, this is what she did. So she smiled and said, okay, oh, that's so crazy. She was kind of distracted. She got a text message from Ben. Ben is this boy that Amelia had not brought up to Sylvia. He apparently is going to the same summer program at Princeton. I had applied. She randomly got a text one day and was like, hey, my name's Ben. I saw you on the roster. And they've been texting back and forth and she hasn't told anyone. It's been really liberating. He's from Albany, so unfortunately she can't see him. While she was walking with Sylvia, he texted her a very sweet message that went along the lines of, forgot to tell you, I think you're awesome and beautiful just the way you are. And that made her smile. That was so kind. Because she was thinking about Ben, she wasn't really paying attention to Sylvia. She picked up on it and got mad. She was like, what are you doing? I'm telling you right now that I kissed this guy and you're not even paying attention. And Amelia's like, I'm sorry, yes, I'm paying attention, but that's great. Why are you so nervous? Sylvia told her, what if I kissed him? I mean, I think he kissed me, but what if I kissed him and he only kissed me back to not be rude? She goes on and on complaining, and Amelia's distracted. And so Sylvia drills it out of her and says, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. Is there a boy that I don't know about? Like, why are you so distracted? Amelia begrudgingly kind of lets it slip, and Sylvia explodes with so much question, so much glee. She's like, oh my gosh. And she instantly jumps to sex. She says, oh my gosh, you slept with him. Amelia was like, no, I didn't. We've just been texting. And then she becomes super suspicious of him. And she's like, okay, how do you even know he's who he says he is? He could be some creepy guy or something. You know, that's just like the name of the game when it comes to any sort of online relationship with someone you've never met before. They could always not be who they say they are. There's this undertone of jealousy from Sylvia. It's really subtle. You don't really notice it in the beginning, but you notice in this conversation, she is upset. It's mostly because she wanted to say something to Amelia and Amelia was too distracted, didn't pay her the attention that she usually gets from her, and so she was mad. They were already getting late. The way their school worked was the security guard would hold the door open, and as soon as he closed it, you were late. You needed to go get a pass. They were walking and they saw the security guard. He was kind of like, come on, let's go. Like, you're gonna be late. I'm not standing around here forever. Amelia was never late. She didn't do that. She was, like I said, she was a good kid. And so Sylvia was like, oh, just be late for once. Come on, I'm trying to talk to you. It's fine. No, I don't want to be late. But then text her. That's when she looks down. Sylvia gets mad. She's like, oh, so for him you'll be late, but not for me. In the most loving way possible, we understand from Amelia that she loved Sylvia. She was her best friend, but that she was a lot. The relationship sometimes was one-sided, but that Sylvia had her back in the end, and she knew that. But a lot of the times, Amelia was quiet and listened to what Sylvia wanted to talk about, not really what she wanted to talk about. We kind of get the feeling that Sylvia doesn't seem like an evil person, but she's also not the best. And the first example we get of this is after her getting upset that she would be late for Ben and not her, she walks into the door, into the school, and then with the security guard, closes the door on Amelia. So now Amelia's late. Sylvia's not late, but Amelia's late. And she's like, great, whatever. She's like, I'm late already. And so she texts Ben back, thanks, I don't know what I'd do without you. And her phone pings again. And she looks down expecting it to be Ben, but it's not. It's from this anonymous number. It says, Prospect Park, Long Meadow, 3 o'clock. Be there. But only birds of a feather flock together. Come alone or don't come at all. And the chapter ends. Then we get into this flashback. It's in Kate's perspective, but it's a flashback. And she just says, I took 8 tests. All of them were positive. So we know that this is from when Kate found out she was pregnant. I'm sure it was a very emotional time, and we get this little snippet of what that was like for her. 24 years old, Kate had a doctor's appointment with the campus doctor and confirmed via ultrasound that she was indeed pregnant. 9 weeks, in fact, telling herself, look, who is she? She's in law school. She was class valedictorian at her fancy Chicago prep school. She graduated with honors from Duke University for her undergrad. Then she went on to law school in Columbia and was assistant editor to the Columbia Law Review. And she paused. This is a resume. This isn't a person. I don't know if I can do this. And she was really in shock, honestly, that she was pregnant. She had all these accomplishments, but she said to herself, that's a resume, not a person. Not like this little person growing inside of me. This little gem who doesn't care about my resume. They just want me to love them. And love wasn't something she was good at. I mean, I explained her history with guys, her parents who were very cold towards her, not rude or mean, just not emotionally available. In that moment, she decided, I might not love them perfectly, but I'm gonna do my best and I'm gonna try. And it was the chapter is very short, but it was so touching. The story then goes into Kate, back present time. It has been a couple weeks since Amelia died. She had the funeral already. She's walking into the law firm offices in Manhattan, and she walks in and she sees a flower of lilies. Lilies. Those were the flowers that her mom had picked out for Amelia's funeral. What a sick, twisted joke. And she wasn't doing well. She had lost a lot of weight, 14 pounds for someone who was already thin. That was a lot of weight. And she had actually started wearing baggy clothes to cover up her, what she called a skeletal figure. When she was invited a couple days ago, the sweet old lady had asked her, how do you keep so slim, dear? And in Kate's mind, she just answered, I'm already dead. That's how I keep slim. And it's really heartbreaking to read this part. She's walking through life, but not in life. It feels like life is just happening and she's not part of it. I can't be at home anymore. There's nothing for me there. The least I could do is come to work, at least do something. Not to say that people in her life weren't helpful. Her parents had come down, although they had missed the first initial days. Kate suspected on purpose. Her mom didn't want to deal with any really bad parts, so her mom and dad took their sweet time getting down to go see her. But her one-time boyfriend Seth that I had mentioned earlier, her and him ended on good terms, and he was actually still a part of her life, like a best friend type of way, brotherly way. He was taking care of her. They were trying to do their best, especially Seth. He was really her rock during this period, making sure she ate, or at least trying to. She really appreciated, but Seth had a husband, he had a family, and at some point he needed to leave, and staying at home, it just wasn't working out for her. The worst part of it all is that Kate could barely sleep. Every time she tried to sleep, she just pictured Amelia on the roof, jumping, killing herself. That was what she couldn't handle. She just couldn't picture her daughter killing herself, taking her life like that. It was haunting her, and even to the point that Kate had thought about ending her life as well. She had that thought often. The reason she didn't go through with it is because she believed that she failed Amelia as a mother, and because she did, she needs to pay the consequences and suffer, because I was a terrible mother, and that's why my daughter killed herself. And it was honestly heartbreaking. I'm gonna jump through this part because it's really sad. Move on to the next part. She's walking towards her office when she runs into Daniel. Now, Daniel has a backstory with her. We don't know what her backstory with him is yet, but we do know that she did not want to see him, and he didn't really want to see her. He was being polite. I'm so sorry for your loss, and doing all the pleasantries, but she could tell he didn't mean it. He could tell she knew that he didn't mean it. It was a very awkward experience. They were competitors. Like I said before, Jeremy, her boss, she was one of his favorite disciples, which means that she had a very good standing in the firm and was a great lawyer, great litigation lawyer. Daniel, she had gone to law school with him, and he was also a great litigation lawyer, but he wasn't technically one of Jeremy's favorites. It actually looked like Jeremy couldn't even really stand him. Jeremy, in Kate's absence, gave Daniel her case, the associate's case, the case that she had been working on. Any other time, she probably would have been upset about it. She honestly didn't care at this point, and Daniel was kind of rubbing it in her face in a very sly way. He was just saying, oh, like, it's been so hard. I've been working so hard on this. You know, I'm looking disheveled because I've been making so much progress in the case, and it's been happening so fast. I don't know, it was being so condescending, but Kate, she could care less. She just told him, congrats. Great. Had no other words for him, and so after some more awkward encounters, he excused himself, she excused herself, and they went on their ways. She finally got to her office, and her phone rang. Who's calling? She picks it up. It was her mom. Remember, I had mentioned before, her mom was emotionally distant. When Kate answered the phone, her mom, Gretchen, said, oh my gosh, you're here? You're at work? Her mom was the biggest supporter of Kate returning back to work. She thought, Jeremy, what is he doing without you? I'm sure he's struggling. You're just the best. Kate was telling her mom, he has like 24 other associates here. I'm sure he was just fine. No, you're irreplaceable. You are outstanding in your career. He was suffering without you, and now you can do even better. Kate she wasn't really into the conversation, and her mom could tell, so she just told her, I'm gonna tell you what no one else will. And Kate's stomach dropped, and she said, what is that, Mom? Look, Amelia's dead, and that's so tragic. All of us feel the tragedy, but life goes on. You need to move on, and maybe you can take advantage of this newfound freedom you have. Newfound freedom? What freedom? And her mom just went on about how, you know, she needs to look on the bright side, and now her career can really take off because she's not worried and stressing all the time, having to split her attention. Kate listened to this for about 30 seconds and then finally went, Mom, you know what? Her mom said, what? She said, F you, Mom. F you. That's all I wanted to say. And she hung up the phone. And she stared at the phone back in the cradle, and then her phone dinged. Here we go. She took her phone out. She looked, but it wasn't her mom. She'd gotten a text message, and the text message said, Amelia didn't jump. She could feel the tears coming, the panic coming, and she said, what type of sick joke is this? That someone would do something like this? As angry and confused that someone would do something like this, there was a little piece of her that said, I knew it. Not just that she believed it, but there was a large part of her that wanted to believe this, right? That her daughter didn't jump. Her daughter was dead, and I think she understood that, but what was killing her the most is that she had taken her life. Couldn't wrap her head around that. She didn't comprehend that. Detective Molina had investigated. He said that he talked to everyone, did all the right things, and the conclusion was that she had jumped, and that was it. The case closed, people moved on. Kate couldn't process that. She wanted a different explanation because she couldn't believe that her daughter had done that. While she's trying to absorb this text message, her secretary Beatrice, her amazing rock, wonderful woman with 6 kids, but treated Kate and the other lawyer she was assigned to as like her 7th and 8th child, looked at her and said, I was about to call security because I saw the lights on in your office and I thought, there's no way Kate is back in here because we agreed that you were going to take 6 weeks off minimum. Did Jeremy ask you to call you back in? I would give this man a piece of my mind. Straight up mom mode, Beatrice says. She's a rock star. And Kate just said, no, Jeremy didn't call me in. I just couldn't be at home anymore. Should she tell Beatrice? She had no idea, but the thought that Amelia had killed herself because she cheated on an English paper. I don't know if I mentioned this before, I'm so sorry, but that's what Amelia was accused of. She had cheated on her English paper, got suspended. Kate didn't believe that. I mean, look, Amelia excelled in all subjects, okay? She was a talented kid, smart, but specifically English, she was a rock star. She could write beautifully. She read every book under the sun. Amelia didn't jump. Amelia didn't jump. Just kept repeating and repeating in her head. Detective Molina, he had talked to supposedly the right people. The only evidence he said was Amelia's body and a sorry written on the wall on the roof, which was interpreted as her suicide note. The school psychologist, Dr. Lipton, stated that Amelia definitely could have done this. The whole thing took 9 days for Amelia's death to be ruled a suicide, and everyone moved on. Everyone, obviously, except Kate. It felt like everyone moved on to her. She was listening to Beatrice tell her over and over again, you shouldn't be here, you need to go home, you're not ready. And then there was a knock at the door. Jeremy, her boss, walked in, just looked at her and said, hi. She said hi back, and they just stared at each other. She could feel Beatrice's eyebrows being raised with good reason. I mean, everyone in the office talked about Jeremy and what he did and who he did it with. And even though he was married to a wonderful woman named Vera and had kids, there was just too many late night meetings, too many late night dinners for people not to speculate things. A lot of it was fake, but there were parts that were true. Basically hinting that people thought that she was one of Jeremy's favorite disciples because they were sleeping together. And the way Kate responded hinted that they weren't sleeping together at the moment, but that something had happened in the past. Then she got another text as she was standing there. And she looked at her phone and it said, Amelia didn't jump. You know it, and I know it. Kate gasped. She put her hand over her mouth and was in shock. And obviously this was, people could see. I mean, Jeremy and Beatrice standing right there. Jeremy just looks at her and says, what's wrong? What happened? I've been getting these texts. And he looked at them. Kate just kept saying, this is some sick joke. Who would do this? And he said, joke? So you don't think there's any validity behind this? You're 100% sure it was a suicide? And then Kate really started to spiral and she just said, how could I not question it? You know, they just said that the sorry was hers and that was it. But what if that wasn't even her? What if that was whoever did this to her? What if they just wrote that afterward as a cover-up? They didn't have the handwriting on the sorry thing analyzed to see if it was Amelia's. Jeremy told her, I know the police commissioner, don't worry. We are going to get this sorted out. Who sent the text? Kate said, I don't know, it's a blocked number. Jeremy takes the phone, hands it to Beatrice and says, take it to IT. They'll figure it out. Beatrice grabs it and she goes, blocked number might be. Honestly, this woman's sassy. The girl got some spunk to her. I really liked Beatrice. She just seemed like such a swell human being. And Jeremy reassures her, look, this is the police commissioner's number. I'm going to give him a call. We'll figure this out. We'll get to the bottom of this. Don't worry. Kate just looks at him almost in tears, says, thank you. Thank you so much for all of this. The next chapter is text messages between Amelia and Ben. And she's texting like, hey, so should I go? What do you think? Prospect Park and Long Meadow at 3 o'clock. And he's like, I don't know. Sounds kind of a trap to me. She says, I know it does sound like a trap, but I think I'm gonna go. And he says, well, why don't you take Sylvia with you? No, because Sylvia wasn't invited. He says, I don't know, but whatever you do, I support you. And so she decides she's gonna go. Against her better judgment, she knew this was probably something from one of those clubs, specifically the Magpies. So clubs. The clubs in this high school was kind of like sororities in college, but even more discreet. They were run by the cool kids, but no one really knew who was in what club. It honestly was just an excuse for these people to get together, hang out, party, get drunk, have sex. That's what the public, other students at Grace Hall, knew about them anyway. Her and Sylvia had actually decided to make a pact a long time ago that neither one would ever join these clubs unless both of them were invited, and even then both of them would probably say no together. She thought about telling Sylvia but then decided against it because why shouldn't she do this? I mean, Sylvia goes off with her boyfriends. She was kind of getting sick of sitting around waiting for Sylvia to get dumped because Sylvia always got dumped, and just wait around to pick up the pieces of Sylvia's life, to hang out with her for a bit, be the center of Sylvia's world until Sylvia finally got a boyfriend again, and the whole process just repeated and repeated. I don't think Amelia realized it, but it was kind of in a revengeful way, and out of jealousy, she decided, I'm gonna go, and I'm not gonna tell Sylvia. She sees a group of the 5 most popular girls in school: Dylan, Zadie, Bethany, Rachel, and Heather. So I'm gonna focus on 2 of them. So Dylan Crosby is this stunning, beautiful girl. She's a junior, and she has this curly red hair. Honestly, the cool kid of the cool kids. That's how Amelia described her. She said that people were so obsessed with her. She was so mysterious and didn't care what anyone thought of her, which is what made people want to be friends with her in the first place. Gracefully even had written a couple articles about her. People were specifically interested in her love life because never once had she been seen with a boyfriend, but the boys were drooling over her at school. Everyone wanted to be with her, and Gracefully had written a column called the Dylan Watch, watching out to see if Dylan was with anyone or anything, but the column quickly dried out because she was never seen with a guy, not like that, never had a boyfriend. Some people even thought maybe she was a virgin, but then people scoffed at the idea because she was so beautiful and so charismatic that there's no way. Amelia was super excited to see Dylan there. She had always admired her from afar, really always wanted to be her friend. She thought she was spunky and cool, and Amelia was super excited. However, every time there was Dylan anywhere, there was Zadie. Zadie was this very slender, tough-looking girl. She had short, cropped black hair with a nose ring, and she had like a streak of white in her hair, kind of like a skunk. And a lot of people wondered if she had put there that purposefully or if she was born like that. She was very cool and popular as well. I mean, she even had a tattoo, and she was only 17. Her parents were very lax. They let her do basically whatever she wanted. She was kind of the opposite of Dylan in a sense, where she was not warm and welcoming. People wanted to be friends with her because they were terrified of her. She had an attitude and made sure the whole world knew it. So as Amelia's walking over, the whole time she's like, should I leave? I should probably leave because I don't want to be a part of this, right? I think what was freaking Amelia out even more was that she had told herself, I don't need to be a part of this. These clubs are dumb. Yet, as she was telling herself that, she realized how much she did want to be a part of it, how much she wanted to be a part of something and have a group of friends instead of just being alone. And even though she liked her life, she was intrigued. She knew she was in trouble. She saw that this whole thing wasn't actually just for her. 2 other girls were also walking up. Their names were Charlie and Tempest. All of these girls went to school with them. She was surprised. All of them were from different categories, different parts of school and the cliques and everything. Tempest, she was even shocked because she was a ballerina. She had her own group of friends and she was very sassy, very cool in her own right. And they were late. And they knew they were late because Zadie immediately when they got here, she said, don't effing be late like that again. Tempest got right in her face and she said, how am I even supposed to know what I'm being late for? Zadie turned around, smiled at the rest of her friends and was like, see, what did I tell you? She's a baddie ballerina. She started talking again and Zadie cut her off. She was like, I like you, but not that much. Don't talk to me like that. Don't ever speak up to me like that again, basically. Then Dylan started talking, introducing them that they're the Magpies. They are the coolest group on campus, that this group is supposed to be fun. And Zadie cuts her off and says, yeah, but if you want to be here, you can effing leave. No one's stopping you. Get out. Amelia heard this and said, okay, this is my opportunity. I need to get up and I need to go. And she looked at Charlie, she looked at Tempest, but everyone stayed. Amelia even realized, oh no, not only am I not going to leave, but I want to stay. The next chapter is text messages. These are Amelia's text messages. At first she's texting Ben. Ben is telling her this is all creepy. It sounds like Skull and Bones. And Amelia texts him back like, yeah, I can't even put their names in my phones. I have to call them Magpie number 1 and Magpie number 2. He's like, sounds creepy. And she's like, yeah, it's creepy, but it's really interesting. And he's like, New York City's crazy. You guys are wild down there. Albany is so different. Then she gets some text message from Sylvia saying, hello, where are you? Sorry, I had field hockey practice that ran extra late, which she didn't. She was with the Magpies. Oh, okay, I don't even see you anymore. What's going on? I have to give you an Ian update. Ian Green, the boy she had been talking to. Amelia just tells her, okay, so sorry, usual time for our morning walk. Then she gets another text from block number that says, no underwear, no bra fledglings. We will be checking. Same time. Meet at the same time and same place. Then she gets another text from a blocked number that says, don't worry about Magpie number 1. She's all bark and no bite. Magpie number 2. Amelia responds, thanks, I really needed that. And then the number responds, no problem. Then she gets another message from another blocked number that says, who's your daddy? Question mark. Next chapter is in Kate's perspective. Kate comes home and she rushes up the stairs towards Amelia's room, hoping to find some answers there. She was really nervous. She hadn't been in Amelia's room since everything happened, and as she's about to turn the knob, the phone rings downstairs. She lets out a breath and she's like, oh, thank God. She runs downstairs. She answers the phone and it's Detective Molina. The conversation was pretty short and he's basically in a very rude and almost like mocking her way. Is like, are you not happy with my investigation? What's going on? And she just said, no, I had some questions and you didn't answer them for me. And so I reached out, but are you reopening the investigation? She's kind of confused. And he says, well, the police commissioner talked to me today. This isn't how I wanted to be on the police commissioner's radar, with the insinuation that I did something wrong. You know, I did my job. Very defensive. Kate is trying to explain, like, look, I have questions that you didn't answer. And he's the whole time just talking about his career. And she's like, this is my life and my daughter. And you're sitting here just worried about your career. And he's like, okay, well, what questions? And she said, new things came up. I got this anonymous text. And he's like, anonymous text? Really? Like, not believing her. And she said, yes, I got this anonymous text and I want this looked into. So this anonymous text is more important from the fact that the medical examiner ruled your daughter's death a suicide. She goes on to say, look, my daughter, she didn't kill herself. And he says, oh, really? You're so sure about that? I don't want to hear this anymore. I'm going to find out what happened to my daughter, whether you decide to help me or not. Kate was getting frustrated at this point. So I can either do it with or without you. And he says, really? And the most condescending voice, and just says, well, if you're gonna do that, then, and she just flings the phone. Kate's done. She threw the phone, broke it probably. I need to rein in my emotions, because what am I supposed to even investigate without his help? I need him, and he's a detective that was assigned to my daughter's case, and I just blew up. And Kate decides to head up to Amelia's room again, and she's sitting there just going through everything, and it was honestly a really emotional experience for her. She's going through and seeing all the beautiful books that Amelia had so many books in her room. Like I said, she was a bookworm. She was going through all of them. So many Virginia Woolf books. That was one of her favorite authors, Virginia Woolf, who was actually known for writing about suicide and stuff. So that didn't make Kate feel better. But she was sitting on her bed when she heard a noise. And she just screamed, get out of my effing house. She hears someone come in. Hey, are you armed? You're not armed, are you? And it's Seth. She looked at him and said, what are you doing here? And he says, well, I'm sorry, I rang the doorbell, but you really shouldn't keep your door open like that. Just some lunatic on the street could just walk right in. And she goes, yeah, I know, apparently. And he just looks at her kind of sad and says, that wasn't necessary, was it? She shakes her head, apologizes. I mean, Seth had really been there for her, and she didn't have that many friends in the city, and he was going above and beyond for her. She felt bad, so she apologized to him. As she was apologizing, he kind of looked around and realized where they were. Very gently, he told her, you know, maybe we should go downstairs instead of being in here. And she said, I got an anonymous text today that Amelia didn't jump. And I just knew it. I mean, I knew there's no way she could have committed suicide. He just looked at her and said, an anonymous... And she said, not you two. You can't not believe me, please. He says, okay, an anonymous text. But didn't the police investigate? And she said, well, police make mistakes. And so you could tell he was humoring her. That's what Kate said. But he was trying to do his best. And he just said, okay, so you think the police made a mistake. So what are we doing here? And she said, I'm going to comb through everything. Would you help me? Seth agrees, and he stays in there. I'm gonna go downstairs and look through her other things, because I think her bag was downstairs. Opened her bag and there was her computer in there and her phone. Her phone was dead. As she was charging her phone up, she pulls out a nice copy of Amelia's essay. The essay that she had supposedly been accused of cheating on and plagiarizing. It's about the book To the Lighthouse, which is by Virginia Woolf. And Kate just couldn't comprehend this. That was the most far-fetched thing from this whole elaborate story, that Amelia had supposedly plagiarized on this essay and then killed herself, because Amelia wouldn't need to plagiarize on this essay. I mean, she had read The Lighthouse when she was a young girl for fun. She knew that book super well. There wasn't any reason for her to do that. Honestly, any parent would agree. You want to know what your kid is doing, but at the same time, a part of you is like, do I really, in some sense? That's how Kate was feeling. She had never snooped through Amelia's things before, that she trusted her. And going through her stuff now, she knew she would maybe find stuff that she didn't want to see. And when her phone finally powered up, Kate went through her phone and she noticed that it was meaningless texts, something about magpies, some text to Sylvia, and this boy named Ben. And it was a blocked number, and Amelia said, who is this? And he said, hey, this is Ben, sorry, this is a family member's phone. And she said, oh, I almost didn't answer. And Ben responds, oh, did you ask her about Paris? And she said, yep, it's a no-go. And he says, oh, well, okay. And she says, well, what else should I try? And he said, I don't know, she's your mom. And she said, Yeah, she's my mom. She's all mine. Lucky me, like sarcastically. That broke Kate's heart. I mean, she knew that's how kids are. Sometimes they're unappreciative for their parents, but just hearing, like seeing it, that Amelia had said that, it kind of hurt. And so she pulls her computer out and starts going through Amelia's computer, which was super well organized. And she finds gracefully posts. Some of parents' worst nightmare, reading through a very vulgar, insulting blog. The first one she reads is mostly about Sylvia, actually, who she knows Sylvia. She's been best friends with Amelia since she was a young girl. And the post basically says that Sylvia sleeps around, is on birth control. It says pretty vulgar things about her. It also mentions how Tempest, which is, if you remember, Tempest is one of the 3 girls that joined the Magpies. So it was Tempest, Charlie, and Amelia. Apparently Tempest needs to start wearing underwear. So insinuating that Tempest had gone through with the text that said no bra, no underwear. And then there was another final post. This one really broke Kate's heart. And I'm actually going to read it to you word for word because I don't want to summarize this. So let me get the book real quick. The post said, "Amelia Brown has arrived, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. As of 2 nights ago, she's officially a woman. So for all of you out there who hope to hook that brass ring, too bad, so sad. Somebody beat you to the punch, and you'll never believe who the lucky winner is. You won't hear it here. Some things even I know better than to put it in writing." So reading in between the lines, this post basically said, Amelia is no longer a virgin. 15-year-old, and she's no longer a virgin. And the worst part is, Kate said that she wasn't really upset that Amelia wasn't a virgin anymore, but then she corrected herself and she said, okay, maybe I was. But what hurt the most is that she didn't know. Amelia would normally have talked to her about stuff like this. I mean, Kate had even prepared a speech to tell her, you know, the talk about love and about sex and how, you know, you don't have to do until you're ready, and protection, all this stuff. And she was hoping that Amelia would come to her one day. She thought she really knew her daughter, that she would come to her one day and talk to her about it before anything happened. As she's sitting there almost in tears at this point, Seth comes down and he goes, "Hey," and she looks at him and she says, "What's up?" And he looks pretty grim. "Did you find anything?" And he goes, "Yeah, I did." And he kind of looks like he's hesitating, like he doesn't want to show her. And she says, "Show me." He says, "Well, first I found these," and it was her mom's old journals. So Kate's old journals, but Amelia's mom. Kate looked at them and was like kind of panicking because she wrote a lot of stuff in there about everything. And she could only assume that maybe Amelia was trying to find out who her dad was and maybe he was in the journals. And she had no idea how much she had read of them. But then Seth also said, "I also found these." And they were a ton. I believe there were 21 notes that all said in caps, "I hate you!" exclamation point. Kate was shocked. She said, "What does this mean? I can't believe, is my daughter getting bullied? Was she getting bullied and I didn't even know this? Who would do this?" So after some time, Seth leaves and he promises, like, you know, to check up on her. Kate kind of forced him to leave. She was like, "You have family, just go, I'll be fine," right? She's sitting there after Seth left and she gets a knock on her window that startles her. And it's this woman who's wearing red lipstick and she's like, "I'm sorry, can I?" And so Kate's like, "Oh." So she goes to the front door and she opens the door and she's like, "I'm really not in the mood for visitors, but gotta keep it the pleasantries." So she smiles at her. The woman apologized and she said, "I'm so sorry. I tried knocking, but I didn't get any answer. And I saw that the lights were on, so I was hoping someone was home. And I'm so happy I caught you. My name is Adele Goodwin and I am with Grace Hall's PTA." And Adele's like, "I'm so sorry. I came here unannounced. I should have called first. I just wanted to see if you were home. I hate surprise guests as well, and I'm so sorry." Kate's like, "No, it's fine. Just come in. It's okay." And so she comes in and she just tells her, like, "Oh, I'm with the PTA and I wanted to know if we had your permission to put on a memorial service. The kids want to put a memorial for Amelia, and we were hoping if you had some photos that you could send over our way." She tells her, "Yeah, I can send photos." So they're kind of trying to make awkward small talk. "I hear you're a lawyer. You're a single mom?" And she says, "Yes, I'm a litigation lawyer." And she says, "Oh, I'm a lawyer as well. Where do you work?" Kate tells her, "Oh, I work at Sloan Thayer." Oh, she gets that reaction a lot from people who are also lawyers. I mean, Sloan Thayer has a reputation of being very cutthroat. Their lawyers are great, but they're pretty vicious. Adele recovers quickly and tells her, "Oh, well, that's a great firm. I know some people actually who work there still. Would you know them?" Kate's kind of done with it. She's done with the social etiquette or whatever, and she just tells her, "Look, it's a big firm. If they're not a litigation lawyer specifically in my department, I probably don't know them." Adele gets the message and says, "Okay." She says, "Also, the kids are interested in putting a suicide awareness thing in honor of Amelia." And Kate immediately says, "No." Adele wasn't even finished with her sentence, so she's like, "I'm sorry, but what do you mean? Like, not expecting her to say no. She thought it was more of a courtesy. Kate says, no, look, I'm sorry, but something happened today that points to that Amelia's death might not have been a suicide. And Adele is shocked by this. Kate tells her, look, I'm not sure yet. I don't know everything, but there's a possibility, even if it's small, that, and then Adele cuts her off and says that she might not have killed herself. Kate asks her, like, please just hold off for anything for suicide yet. Please, just, can you wait? And Adele smiles at her and says, of course, yeah, no, sure, no problem. We'll wait to put on the benefit. Adele gets up to leave and she looks at Kate again and says, oh, I had the pleasure of meeting your daughter at the Harvest Festival. She was so kind and so great. I couldn't help but notice her two different colored eyes, because Amelia actually had these beautiful light eyes, but they were different colors. One was blue and the other one was like a light hazel. It's actually called Waardenburg syndrome. She doesn't have it in the family. I'm not sure where it comes from, but yeah, she was diagnosed when she was younger. And Adele kind of looks at her and is like, oh. And the look she gives her is very different. Kate notices it, but then Adele just recomposes herself and says, okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And she leaves. Then we get a blog post from Gracefully, which basically is summarizing that Charlie and Tempest have joined the Magpies, and that Tempest is another ballerina with an eating disorder, basically. And then at the end of the post, it says that Liv, the English professor at Grace Hall, has been stood up yet again by another man, and she needs to get better taste in men. Then we have a Facebook post from Amelia that just says, hoping I don't get caught. Two people liked this post, and Sylvia commented, getting caught for what? Sucking up too much? We get a stream of texts from Amelia and Dylan. Dylan is texting her, hey, did you scope out Zaritsky? Amelia basically confirms, yeah, everything's all set in place. Dylan tells her, wow, you seem really cool about this. Most other people would be panicking. And Amelia tells her, no, I'm good. Is that a problem, or is that good that I'm good? And Dylan kind of just says, I think you're so cool. See ya, I'll talk to you later. Then she texts Ben a couple minutes after that and says, oh my gosh, Dylan texted me. And he says, more games? What else does she want? And she says, never mind. And Ben says, no, what did she say? And she said, nothing. He's like, tell me what she said. Oh, you know, we've just been texting. And she kind of backed out, didn't really tell him much, but he just told her, be careful, okay? I just want to make sure that you're not going to get hurt. I don't want these girls using you. And she says, I know. I'm worried too. And he says, okay, at least if you're worried, then that means you're being careful. Then she gets another text from a blocked number that same night that says, who's your daddy? You don't have more questions about your daddy? Next, we get a scene still in Amelia's perspective, and she's sitting in Mr. Woodhouse's office, the headmaster's office, and she's in trouble. We're not sure what it is yet, but she's sitting there and he's reading a note from Mr. Zaritsky. When he's done reading, he looks at her and asks her, do you know what this note says? In a very snarky way, which she didn't even mean to come out too snarky, she says to herself, no, the letter is addressed to you, so I didn't read it. He calmly puts the note down and she knows she's about to get in trouble. Basically, she had zip-tied Mr. Zaritsky's backpack to the chair, so when he tried to get up, he stumbled and hurt himself. He had apparently already been in pain. He had a herniation in his discs. That just made it worse. He was very upset with Amelia. Amelia thought that, wow, even her goody two-shoesness is not going to get her out of this one. Sylvia always said she was untouchable at Grace Hall because she's such a goody two-shoes, but Amelia had a feeling she wasn't going to get out of this one. She just wanted to be able to be good enough to complete her tasks. She had been going to the Magpie meetings regularly. They were twice a week and once on the weekends. At the meetings, they were basically what you would think high school meetings are. They weren't parties, but almost parties. There was alcohol, people were smoking cigarettes, they were always passing by a joint, and Amelia had not smoked a joint, but she said she'd become close. She came close to smoking the joint, and even though she hadn't ever considered doing that, it was so common there, so she thought, okay, I might be smoking joint soon. She had been hanging out with Dylan. Dylan was always someone she thought was so cool. She had this mysterious way about her. She just made you want to hang out with her, made you want to be her friend. Amelia was very close to actually leaving and quitting because Zadie was so mean to her. She was constantly cursing her off, telling her she was worthless, annoying, just so rude. But Dylan was so different and sweet to her, which made Amelia say, okay, maybe it's worth it, because she knew that if she left, Dylan would probably stop talking to her, and she really liked hanging out with Dylan. It made her feel great. So she kept through it, but this hazing that she needed to do was getting intense. The rules were she needed to haze 3 different times, different people. Rituals for her to be able to become a full-fledged magpie. The first one, she needed to do something to a professor. The second one, to a school administrator. And the third one, she needed to reach out to some lonely, nerdy boy, make him fall in love with her, and then get him to send naked pictures of himself and embarrass him by showing everyone else. This one she was really nervous about. She kind of wanted to get out of it because honestly she sympathized with these boys. She felt like that was herself too, just waiting for something exciting to happen in life. But how was she supposed to back out? If she backed out, then she would get kicked out and then she wouldn't be able to hang out with Dylan anymore. She just said, okay, I'll take it one step at a time. The first one was the hazing on a professor. So she decided to zip tie Mr. Zaritsky's bag. That was her plan. Next, she was going to put Vaseline on a doorknob, specifically Mrs. Pearl's doorknob, who was the dean of students, because honestly she thought that lady deserved it. But now she got caught. So she was sitting in Mr. Woodhouse's office. Mr. Woodhouse just kept looking at her and said, what are you going to do about this? This is very unlike you. I looked at your file before you came down here and I'm impressed. You hardly have anything in the file except your great grades, sports awards, outstanding achievements. Teachers have nothing but great things to say about you. Why? This is so out of character for you. You've never even been marked late. Amelia knew this was technically wrong because she had been late when she first got the text about the Magpies meetings. When she was with Sylvia and Sylvia stormed off, she had technically been marked late. Will had marked her late, but someone in the office must have decided to not put it in her file. And this shocked her. I mean, maybe Sylvia was right. She had like this force field around her that even when she got in trouble, because she spent so many years with her nose in a book, people couldn't believe that she actually would do anything bad. And they didn't even mark her late for that. But I guess it was starting to crumble. And she was having mixed emotions about that because being perfect all the time was a lot of pressure for her. She said that maybe it was good that she was having this pressure, but some part of her also felt uncomfortable. But that part was outweighed by the fact that if she didn't do this, then she would have to leave and Dylan wouldn't speak to her anymore. She just had to keep doing this. Mr. Woodhouse looked at her, and when he finally realized that she had done this, he asked her, are those girls the ones that put you up to this? You know, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be a part of this. I know your mom works a lot and you're alone a lot of the time, but those girls don't have your best interests at heart. She was shocked. Amelia was getting nervous. I mean, the Magpie rules were you never out them. Never ever tell a professor or anyone with power about their existence. She had to keep it a secret. But it seemed Mr. Woodhouse kind of knew everything already. And he was looking at her like she was some wounded animal, pitying her. So she immediately disagreed with him, obviously. She said, no, I'm not lonely. But as she was saying that, she kind of realized she was lying. But she didn't want to look too deep into that. She just needed to get out of there. So she told him, look, I have a calculus test. Can I leave? I'll apologize to Mr. Zaritsky. I'm sorry, okay? Mr. Woodhouse was quiet for a bit and just looked at her and said, look, you're really bright. These girls don't have your best interests at heart. I've taught at so many different schools and seen this time and time again, where people who are manipulators, they prey on people who are having strong emotions of sadness, and they just manipulate these people into doing things that otherwise they wouldn't have done. Preying on their weaknesses like loneliness. Just be careful. She didn't want to hear any more of this. Amelia was done. Like, who was he? Some shrink that he was analyzing her? She just wanted to leave because even though she didn't agree with what he was saying, deep down, a part of her knew it was true and she didn't want him to burst that bubble. So she just stood up and said, I really have to go take my calculus quiz. Can I please go? And he says, yeah, Amelia, you can go. I'm not going to write you up for this one, but next time I will. Amelia was shocked. I mean, he wasn't going to write her up. Maybe she really did have this force field around her. As she was leaving, Mr. Woodhouse called out after her and said, Amelia, I'm serious. Please be careful. Sometimes you don't realize how fast the current is moving until it's already taken you. Next, we have a scene of her still in Amelia's perspective, but she meets up Sylvie and they are eating pizza. And Sylvie's trying to talk to her about Ian Green. Who else? Ian says he wants to hang out, but does that mean he wants to date me? What should I do? And Amelia's distracted. She's thinking about everything else but what Sylvie's saying to her. And her phone keeps going off. She's trying to hide it from Sylvie because she knows she's gonna get jealous. She looks down at her phone and it says, party at Magpie 2. Put pizza down. Dump harlot. We're about to pop your cherry. She knew this was from Sadie. I mean, Sadie had already called Sylvie a harlot multiple times. She just kept thinking, oh, how am I gonna get away from Sylvie without her knowing? I mean, juggling lying to Sylvie and her mom about where her whereabouts have been has been really difficult, but also very exciting. Amelia had never done anything like this before. It was kind of exciting having this secret that she couldn't tell anyone, especially her mom and Sylvie. I mean, there was a part of her that felt really guilty and she didn't like doing this, but at the same time, it was thrilling. Amelia had never done anything like this before. So she was trying to hide her phone because it vibrated again and it was the same number and it said, don't be late. But Sylvie caught her and she said, oh, who are you texting? Your BFF Ben again? He's such a loser. I don't even know why you're talking to him. Who has time to answer all the time anyway? And Amelia looked at her and said, well, I answer him back, so does that mean I'm a loser too? And Sylvie didn't really say anything to that. Amelia got upset. She wanted to tell her, well, I'm not a loser. You know what, Sylvie? You're the loser because the magpies picked me and I'm running around doing all these things and you're just sitting here complaining about a boy who's obviously gonna dump you. Of course, she could never say that to her. The boys always dump Sylvie and Amelia would be there to pick up the pieces, but maybe this time she wouldn't be. She would be off with the magpies, being not a loser. She looked at Sylvie and obviously she couldn't say any of these things. And so she just told her, oh, sorry, I was my coach. I left my sneakers, my shoes on the field. He wants me to go get them. I'm so sorry, I have to go. And Sylvie kind of looks sad and she says, well, you're coming back, right? And she says, look, I have a bio test tomorrow. I'll catch you later, okay? I'm sorry. And before she turns away, Sylvie goes, wait, so do you really think Ian Green wants me to be his girlfriend? When she walks up there, she sees that Dylan is standing outside holding a cigarette, smoking a cigarette. But the cigarette kind of looks very foreign on Dylan's hand. It kind of looks like a prop. She can't figure out if it's because she's an actress. So Dylan puts a cigarette out and says, oh, we've been waiting for you. You're the guest of honor. Come on. So she pulls her inside. And there's a whole group of people in this room, lots of people. They're all sitting there. She immediately gets handed a beer and she grabs it so tightly. I mean, she doesn't drink. The only time she's ever sipped alcohol was when one time her and Sylvie had some wine and that was about it. But everyone was drinking and smoking and so she can't be the odd one out. I mean, what would people say? So she took the beer bottle and she headed inside and there were a lot of people there. It was basically a party, girls, boys, lots of people drunk. And they ran into Sadie. And Sadie was instantly rude. She was like, oh, look, it's Crazy Eyes. What are you gonna mess up today? And all this stuff. And Dylan kind of got mad at her. She said, stop, you said you would be nice. And Sadie looked at her and said, if you knew how much I effing hated Crazy Eyes, you would know that this is me being nice. And you'd be proud of me. Amelia just thought to herself, why does she hate me so much? I didn't even do anything to her. We barely even interacted before this whole thing. At that moment, Carter Rose walked in. Amelia described him as looking kind of woozy. My conclusion, he was probably phased or very high or drunk or, you know, a number of other things. Sadie instantly turned to him, went over, grabbed his hips, pulled them to hers and started making out with him. He looked even more dizzy after the whole thing and she took him away and they sped away. Dylan then grabbed her arm and said, hey, I want to show you something. Come up upstairs with me. So she took her upstairs. On the way there, she noticed that Ian Green was there, the guy that Sylvie is crazy about. He was sitting there with a girl, kind of draped over his body. Yeah, it looked like Mr. Ian Green was not only visiting Sylvie's chambers. That makes sense. What was worse, Amelia noticed that kind of looks like Zadie. Is that Zadie? But before she even could process that, Dylan tugged her arm and said, come on. And when she looked back, he was gone. By the time they got upstairs, they went into this room that was filled with so many bookshelves, beautiful, beautiful bookshelves. Dylan told her, my dad collects these. Some of them are first edition, actually, I think. And she pulled one book, a first edition of The Sun Also Rises, and handed it to Amelia. Amelia was nervous to take the book because she had a beer in her hand and didn't want to spill what was left of it. She had already drank in the majority of it, but didn't want to accidentally spill any alcohol on this first edition book. Dylan told her, look, just look around, but suddenly her whole demeanor changed. I mean, the same easygoing smile that had taken her up the stairs and wanted to show her this was gone. Dylan said, I have to go do something. You can stay here if you want. I have to go. And she just bolted out the door. And so Amelia stood there kind of dumbfounded. She left a while later and texted Ben, I went to my first co-ed party tonight, and he said, was it all sex and drugs? Amelia responded, pretty much. He said, did you do that? She said, no, not really. Implying that, no, she didn't have sex or drugs, but she did drink. When she got home, she was by herself. Ben just told her, oh, okay, that's great. I'm happy you're safe and everything. And Ben was just so easy for her to text to. She always felt like he understood her very easily and was very supportive. But she told him, look, Dylan kind of cooled off. That same bright smile that she had, it was, I don't know, Dylan seemed off. She showed me the books, but then she kind of got weird. He said, oh, why do you think that is? And she said, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. And he said, well, how am I supposed to know? I like boys. You girls are too confusing for me. Amelia just laughed. At first, she thought maybe, oh, he's texting me because he's interested and we I'm gonna have a boyfriend and it's gonna be so exciting. And then he told her, no, I'm gay. But that was okay. It was so great to have a friend, even if it was not romantic. She appreciated his friendship. She went on to go order food. She ate alone most of the time. She loved her mom so much. Her mom worked so hard. She knew she couldn't be home all the time, but especially now that Leela had left, she ate most of her meals by herself, like 4 times a week by herself. And it was pretty lonely. The people were so sweet though, the people she ordered food from. They knew her address by heart. Thai, Chinese, Italian, you name it. They were always said things like, for you, anything, my darling. She ordered her food, then picked up the Virginia Woolf book to the lighthouse that she had to write an essay on. Remember, she was accused of plagiarizing this essay. So now we have it from Amelia's perspective. Amelia said she barely even needed to read the book because she memorized it by heart a long time ago. She loved Virginia Woolf. She went on to say that Virginia Woolf just had such a cool style about her writing. And honestly, she was just going to skim through the book just as a little refresher because she knew the whole thing. It was getting kind of late when she heard her front door open and her mom's quiet little footsteps trying to creep up the stairs. Her mom did this a lot of the time, thinking she was asleep and not wanting to wake her up. Saw her mom poke her little head in and said, oh, sorry, did I wake you? And Amelia let her know, no, it's okay, Mom. I was already awake. Her mom came over and gave her a big hug and a kiss. She asked her how her day was and she said, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you had to eat dinner alone. I was trying to get out of the office. And Amelia just hugged her tighter and she tried to keep the tears at bay and let her know, I know, Mom, it's okay. I know you rather would have been here instead. When her mom pulled away, her eyes were glassy, like she was about to cry. Her mom did that a lot. Whenever she got tired or was a little overworked, she was a total crier, would cry all the time, especially when she felt guilty. But Amelia didn't want to add to her guilt. Her mom worked hard. She knew she loved her. Her mom worked hard and did absolutely everything she could for Amelia. A thought popped into her head and she asked her mom, Mom, what do you think of sororities? Kate was taken aback. She had the same thoughts that Mr. Woodhouse had, that sororities just pushed for bad behavior and preyed on the weak. Amelia noted her mom asked her, why are you interested in these all of a sudden? She just said, oh, I'm just writing a paper for a class. I have another question for you. Is that okay? And her mom said, yeah, shoot. What age did you start liking boys? Kate froze and looked at her and said, look, are you trying to tell me you're dating someone before I answer this? It's okay if you are. And Amelia shook her head. I was like, no, Mom, I'm not dating anyone. Trust me, I would tell you if I was. This is also for another class. And Amelia could tell she was pushing it. Her mom probably wouldn't believe this, but she just smiled at her and said, okay, well, I was 13, and then looked at Amelia and said, actually, maybe I was 15 or even 20. Amelia chuckled. She knew her mom was lying. 20 is a bit ridiculous in her head. She just laughed. It was so nice talking to her, and in her mind, she decided, you know what? I think it's time. I'm gonna tell my mom everything. So she said, Mom, look, I've got tapped by, and she got cut off. Her mom's phone rang and her mom looked at the phone and said, oh, this is Victor. He's in Tokyo and he's probably freaking out, and looked at her and she said, he's called me like 4 times today, but it can wait. Can what you had to say wait? And Amelia just looked at her and she knew that with one word, if she told her mom, no, I can't wait, her mom would put the phone down and give her full undivided attention. But she didn't want to do that to her mom. Also, maybe it wasn't ready to tell her. She thought she was, but she wasn't 100% sure about everything yet, so she could wait. So she just smiled at her mom and said, it's okay, Mom, it can wait, and decided not to tell her. So her mom gave her a big smile, a hug, and she took the phone call and walked out the door. This would be one of, I think, the biggest turning point as to a lot of pain that's gonna come. I think a lot of things would have been different had Amelia told her mom in this case, and it's really sad to see. Next chapter is in Kate's perspective. It's a flashback. 3 weeks, 4 days, and 5 hours since Amelia was born. Kate said that she's never been so exhausted, but also so full of life and in awe of this little bundle. You know, the wet nurse that Gretchen paid for was a lifesaver and really helped her, but she knew that her mom just did that so she didn't have to be there anymore helping her. She was in a lot of pain, but that little bundle of joy just honestly was the reason she would get up in the mornings now. And she talked about how when she was in the hospital, she was exhausted, barely slept because her roommate in the hospital had a husband who was there with her. And so the baby was never sent away. That couple, they kept their baby, and the nurses for Kate kept insisting, look, you need rest, so why don't we take the baby? We'll take them to the nurse and we'll bring her back. But she looked at that couple who had both the parents, and that baby never got sent away. So she said, My Amelia doesn't deserve any less, so I won't send her away either, even if that means she has to stay up. She decided in that moment she's never gonna get less. Just because it's me, that doesn't mean she's gonna get any less. The next chapter is in Kate's perspective. So we're back to the present time. Kate is still reeling from the text, Amelia didn't jump. She's standing in her kitchen making herself a cup of coffee. It's very early in the morning, like 7 a.m. in the morning, and she gets a knock at the door. It's Kelsey. Kelsey is her next door neighbor. Kate believes she is this picturesque mother, kind of making her feel inadequate always her whole life, but she was very kind. She has 2 little boys, a Brazilian husband who's in love with her, so devoted. Kate, every time she would see her, she would just get this pang of jealousy, but also happy for her because she was a good person. I mean, these past few weeks since Amelia had passed, she would come over, make her casseroles, bring her food, laundry, clean, all without being asked and all without any expectation of payment or anything in return. She was so happy to help Kate. She actually almost seemed sad and disappointed when Kate told her she was going back to work and didn't need all of this help anymore. Kate really appreciated her. So she opened the door and Kelsey was standing there smiling. She said, hey, and Kate was a little concerned. She said, oh, did you get locked out? Are you okay? And Kelsey waved her off and said, oh yes, I'm fine. I wanted to check in on you. How are you doing? Kate didn't even know how to answer that question. I got this anonymous text today that Amelia didn't jump. Kelsey was shocked and she said, I actually have to admit something to you. I mean, this is shocking news, but a couple days before Amelia passed, I saw her come into your house with a boy. Kate was shocked. I mean, a boy? What boy? And Kelsey continued on and said, look, he made me uncomfortable. Not really him particularly, but the way Amelia acted with him. She looked also uncomfortable, uneasy, nervous. I don't know. I didn't think much of it then, but especially with what you're telling me now, I feel like it's important. Kate said, well, yeah, her coming over after school with a boy, I mean, it could really only mean one thing, right? And Kelsey said, it wasn't after school. Kate didn't understand. What do you mean after school? What other time would there be? Before school? Kelsey said, it was in the middle of the day, during a school day. There's no way. There's no way Amelia would have cut school. Kate would have known that. She would never leave school early. Cutting school, skipping school, that's not her. And she kept thinking back to the message, lucky me, when she was texting Ben about her mom. Maybe there were things about Amelia she didn't know. Kelsey knew this and didn't say anything to her. And she asked her, she said, why didn't you tell me this before? You should have told me immediately that my daughter wasn't in school. And Kelsey looked guilty. She said, look, you know Amelia babysits and for me, and I just thought, well, maybe if I could get her to tell you. So the next time she was going to babysit, I was going to talk to her about it and get her to admit it to you, because I know that would mean so much more for your guys' relationship. But she never came again. She passed before then. The scene cuts to Kate going to see Duncan. He's the IT guy that Jeremy had in the company, that Beatrice had given her phone to see where the texts were coming from. And as she was walking there, she got another text. I know your dirty little secret, from a blocked number. When she got there, she asked Duncan, look, have you gotten anything? And she also brought Amelia's laptop and her phone. He said, look, I'm sorry, it was untraceable. They used some website thing. I'm sorry, I couldn't get anything else. And she said, okay, that's fine, but is there any way you can print out the files from my daughter's computer? And she handed him the computer. He looked at it and said, like, everything? Facebook, Twitter, all the social media stuff. I mean, that stuff might be easier to look online, and it's a lot of stuff. Also, are you sure you want to know everything? I mean, I'm a 24-year-old guy. I'm pretty stand up. I have a job, but even I wouldn't want my rent seeing some of this stuff that I post. I mean, no parent should ever see their kid doing body shots. Kate was taken aback, but she agreed. She knew. So he said, look, why don't I'll print out everything that I can for hard copy. I'll print it out for you. But in terms of her social media, I'll just give you the passwords and everything, and you could decide when you want to look through that. And she agreed and asked him, okay, how long is this going to take? He said, a couple hours at best. She said, okay, great. As she was leaving, she was heading to the elevator and she got a phone call. She was a little uneasy about it, so she answered hesitantly. She said, hello. Hi, my name is Detective Lewis Thompson from the 78th Precinct. Is this Mrs. Barron? Yes, this is Mrs. Barron. How can I help you? And he said, hi, I am the detective that has taken over your daughter's case. She was confused. I mean, yes, she had offended Detective Molina, but she didn't know that meant he would get reassigned? She asked him, what happened to Detective Molina? Did he get fired? Detective Thompson said, oh no, voluntary departure. He has taken up a job as private security at a different location in Florida. He actually has left. His last day was yesterday. This surprised Kate. She hadn't heard anything from him, but she didn't know that he left. So Detective Thompson tells her, we have the results from the handwriting analysis. And she's shocked. She said, oh, I didn't even know you did one. He said, yeah, we did one, but I have to ask you a question first. And is this your daughter's handwriting? And he reads out a note that she had written to Jeremy as a thank you note for giving her a great reference to the application that she submitted to the summer program for Princeton. When Jeremy found out, he was more than delighted to write that for her. And so Amelia, as a thank you, she wrote him a handwritten note and signed it with Amelia. Detective Thompson asked her, is this your daughter's handwriting? And she said, yes, it is. She was bracing herself for the worst. She thought he was going to tell her, yes, it matches and all this stuff. And he says, well, now that I've confirmed that, I can let you know the handwriting does not match. Kate asked him, are you sure? And he said, it doesn't match, not one bit. They're completely different. Kate was rushing. She was rushing down the building to Jeremy's office. She had to make a stop. She had told Detective Thompson that she would meet him at Park Slope at a restaurant called Ditsy's. But before, she wanted to stop at Jeremy's, and he was sitting in his office with his desk turned around, most likely because he was reading the newspaper at the sports section and didn't want people to see him doing that. She knocked on his door and he was startled, and he turned around. Kate just thanked him. She was so grateful. She said, thank you so much for everything you did. I'm so grateful for you. They're looking into everything, and she gave him a quick synopsis as to what's happening. He said that's great, and let her also know that he had pulled Daniel off of the associated client, the project they were working on, that huge client making tons of money for the firm. He decided to pull Daniel off and said, look, even though he made a good call with what he had been doing, the case is yours. Kate was shocked. Before Amelia's death, she would have been thrilled by something like this, but now she was left with kind of this weird sinking feeling in her gut. She had heard that Jeremy did this, that he would choose a few partners and give them clients that would define their careers, and this was one of them. I mean, the billables, everything he said would be hers. That's a huge thing for a senior partner to do. He told her not to worry, to take care of what she needed to take care of, and when she came back, he would take care of everything until she came back to work. And he said, don't rush, everything will be good. And she left to go meet Detective Thompson. When she met him, he sat down and said, hello, my name is Detective Thompson. They had already met over the phone, but this was the first time they were meeting in person. And he told her, I am from the 78th Precinct for homicide. Kate knew in her heart that Amelia had not killed herself. But hearing confirmation from the handwriting analysis, hearing a homicide detective being there, it was a lot. He sat down and asked her, tell me why you think your daughter didn't kill herself. And Kate went in. She told him all about Amelia, about her grades, her reputation, just, you know, spent the whole time being a mom. Moms who talk about their kids, and it was very heartfelt. Detective Thompson said, I looked through your daughter's file. It's pretty thin. And she says, what do you mean? Detective Molina told me all this stuff. And he said, look, when there's an investigation, every cop does its own thing, every detective has their own way, but even still, there are certain things that have to get done. And Detective Molina, he didn't not get them done. There's certain witnesses you talk to, questions you ask, and a lot of that is missing. And then not even to mention the medical examiner's report. And she said, what do you mean? He said, well, it wasn't in the file, so I had to go looking for it. And when I finally did, it doesn't conclude suicide, because any medical examiner would know if you jump off, you know, your body would land in a certain way and all these things. Amelia had long scratches on her arms. And then he paused and looked at Kate and said, look, do you really want me to continue? This is pretty graphic. And Kate said, yes, continue. He explained that her body was in a position that's not congruent with suicide, that she had scratches on her arms, and a lot of things were missing. The report didn't conclude that it was suicide. Based on the facts of the case, that wasn't it. So he said, look, there are a lot of holes in this. Kate started getting upset. She said, well, what are you going to do? Why didn't you contact Detective Molina? And Detective Thompson said, I did. He is apparently unreachable. He is on a boat in the middle of Florida somewhere and will not be back for another week. Kate was so confused. She said, didn't you say he was working a security job now? And he said, this is not a security job that's like $8 an hour at some Best Buy. He is working at a major company. This is, for some people, a dream. Well-paid, very respected company in Florida. I mean, this company only hires FBI people, cops, military men, very, very elite of the elite. It's not easy getting in here. And he said, so some would say if you're into that stuff, that he landed a great deal. Okay, so what's next? And he said, what's next is we start from ground zero. Do the whole case. again. So her and detective started on the case. The first place that Kate recommended was Sylvia. Sylvia was Amelia's best friend since she was young, so she knew that if anyone were to have answers, it would be Sylvia. When they got there, Julia, Sylvia's mom, was there, and she looked kind of flustered. She was trying to be kind, but at the same time nervous that there was a detective in her house. And she said, okay, let me just call Sylvia down. So she went to call Sylvia down. Sylvia came down looking rough. She looked annoyed, pissed off, did not want to be there. Annoyed at her mom, too. Honestly, she looked more comfortable in front of the detectives than she did with her mom. It looked like her mom just was annoying her. Like, the presence of her mother irked her. That's what it seemed like in the room. They asked her a couple questions. Sylvia confirmed that there's no way Amelia would have cheated on that test. She even told the detective, cheated on that essay, I'm sorry. She even told the detective, Amelia could have taught that class. That's how intelligent she was, especially in English. Are you kidding me? She was just upset because they were accusing her that she did that and that they didn't believe her. She was very upset because even her English professor, Liv, she was super close to her professor, Liv, and there's no way she would have done that. Kate was happy that Sylvia confirmed that, especially to the detective, because it's one thing for a mom to say it, but for someone else to also back up the fact that your daughter wouldn't do something like that, it was good. Julia then kept trying to usher them to go out. She said, look, Sylvia's not been feeling well. She's been sad and depressed. And Sylvia cut her off and she said, Mom, I'm a teenager. We're all depressed. And Kate had a smile at that. I mean, the thought of that isn't funny, but it was something Amelia would have said, and that reminded her a lot of her daughter and how similar their personalities were, although very different. Kate had been reading the text between Sylvia and Amelia, and the last text she got from Sylvia was, I'll make a distraction, you book it. Sylvia stated that afterwards she made a distraction, got Amelia out of Mr. Woodhouse's office, but then she ducked to the bathroom because people realized Amelia was gone, and then everything happened. Sylvia was pretty rude. At one point she even said she jumped off a roof, okay? Very aggressively. Her mom was trying to shush her, and they brought up Gracefully to Sylvia, the blog, and she visibly looked uncomfortable. And Kate understood why. I mean, the things written about Sylvia in that blog were not kind at all. And her mom, Julia, was asking, what is the blob? And Sylvia quickly corrected her and said, it's not a blob, it's a blog, Mom, and it's just someone dumb who has nothing to do better with their life. And Sylvia said, she jumped off a roof. What's there to investigate? I don't understand. And Kate just looked at her softly and said, I want to know why. If she did, I want to know why. What happened to him? Was it boys? Was it sad? And Sylvia said, no, it's not boys. There was no boys in her life. Sylvia just looked up at both of them and said, you know why she jumped? You know why she fell off that roof? Because she was stupid. And honestly, I wish I'd never met her. And the chapter ends. The next chapter is back to Amelia and her texting. She's texting Ben, letting him know that Dylan's being weird. She's hot and she's cold. She's less and she's hot one second, cold the next second. She's having whiplash from all of this. And Ben's just being supportive, comforting her. You know, the usual works. Then she gets a text from Sylvia asking her if her jeans make her butt look fat. A couple hours later, she gets a text from Dylan saying, I was just thinking about you. Amelia responds, good thoughts? And Dylan says, definitely. And she says, me too. I was thinking about you too. Dylan asks her, will I see you tomorrow? And Amelia says, absolutely. Then she gets another text a couple hours later from a blocked number that says, your mom is lying to you. Are you just going to let her do that? Chapter ends. The next chapter is in Amelia's perspective again, and her and Sylvia are at the Tea Lounge, which is this little cafe place. She's finishing up her essay from To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. She's pretty happy with it, but at the same time, she's annoyed that Liv, the professor, gave her such weak prompts. Amelia was trying to be humble in her own head and saying, look, it's not that I'm a genius or anything, but there's just so much you could have written about, and the prompts she gave us were just so basic, so simple. Further proving the point that this girl was intelligent, especially when it came to books. She doesn't mess with books. They're sacred. It's a real thing. She even enjoyed writing her essay, and she was finishing up the last bits of it when Ian Green came in. He was very kind to her, very sweet. She got up to leave. She had to go to Sadie's house anyway, but it was just weird. It felt like her and Ian had this secret life that Sylvia didn't know about, because they saw each other. He was also in another club and they saw each other a lot, and a lot of the times he wasn't by himself. He was with other girls. But she didn't want to break Sylvia's heart, and also telling Sylvia meant that she had to admit that she was part of the Magpies, which Sylvia would be so upset about because she had promised her they wouldn't do anything like that. It was hard. She just had to keep this life a secret, and as much as she didn't like it, that was what she had to do. So she excused herself, left Sylvia and Ian, and went to Zadie's house. She was walking over to Zadie's house, and then she bumped into none other than Mr. Woodhouse. At that time, she didn't know it was him. She felt someone grab her arm and screamed. Mr. Woodhouse was like, oh my, I'm sorry. I wanted to say hi. And she finally calmed down and realized that's so weird. What is he doing in this part of town? He asked her, so where are you going? And she obviously couldn't answer Zadie's. He asked with a glint in his eye that he kind of knew what was going on. So she said, oh, I'm going to visit my aunt. And he just stared at her for a while. She had no aunt. He knew this. She knew this. And so he slowly, after a long pause, just nodded and said, okay, well, just be careful. You know, and he tried, in a short way, to summarize the conversation, he tried to convince her again that those girls weren't worth it. He let her know that, yes, I know you're lying, and they're not worth it, and she has a future, and that he's very sorry he scared her. She met up with Zadie, and Zadie was her usual rude self to her, but this time a little different, because Amelia spoke up and said, why do you hate me so much? She couldn't even believe the words had come out of her mouth, but they slipped out, and Zadie just looked at her and said, I don't hate you. Can you just stop being you? Amelia was confused by this, and then she ran into Dylan. Zadie walked away, and she asked Dylan, why does she hate me so much? She doesn't even want me here. Dylan looked at her and said, what do you mean she doesn't want you here? She picked you. Amelia was thrown by this. Zadie had picked her to join the Magpies? She heard Zadie scream, hurry up! Dylan grabbed her hand, and they walked hand in hand down to where everyone was, in the basement. This made Amelia feel so warm for whatever reason. Then Dylan stopped suddenly, let go of her hand, basically bumped into her back. Dylan turned around, looked at her, and she could hear Zadie's voice in the background in the room. They were still in the hallway. They hadn't gotten to the room yet. And Dylan grabbed her face and kissed her. Amelia was shocked. She kissed her back. I mean, this was her first kiss. She kissed her back, but Dylan let go of her and just walked into the room without saying anything else. Amelia went in kind of dazed. Zadie kept talking. She heard something, birds of a feather, something, and she was zoned out until she felt sharp pain on her foot. Zadie was stepping on her feet, and she said to her in a loud way in her face, are you effing listening to me? Because if you're not in, you can leave. Amelia thought about this for a second. She said, maybe I can leave now. I mean, Dylan kissed me. I was here mainly for her, honestly, and I can leave now. And she looked at Dylan looking for some sort of sign, but Dylan didn't look at her. Didn't make eye contact, was quiet, looking down. Amelia processed that if she left, Dylan would do that. Ignore her, not talk to her, and she wasn't ready to give that up. So she looked at her and said, I'm in. What was she in for? That meeting was about how a new new thing that the Magpies had to do if they wanted to become a magpie was on the Birds of a Feather website. They needed to post a nude or undressed picture of themselves, and whoever got the most likes is the winner of that. They needed to get the most likes as possible. Amelia would never have done something like this. She wasn't comfortable doing this, but she just looked at Dylan and she wasn't looking at her. She was just confused. And so Zadie kept taunting her and cursing at her until finally Amelia was like, I'm in. And Zadie wouldn't stop until Dylan stood up and said, leave her alone. Zadie, I said, leave her alone. And the room went quiet. And Amelia looked at Dylan and just hope blossomed in her chest. Then we move on to Kate's perspective again. Kate's with Detective Thompson, and they're pouring through all of the printouts she got from Duncan, the IT guy. Pouring. She sees text as well from this guy asking her if she's coming to the party and that someone's bringing E as an ecstasy. Kate's heart sank, but then it warmed up again because Amelia said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going. What are you, a drug addict? Almost saying to the guy, like, absolutely not. I'm not doing drugs. That made Kate feel a lot better until Detective Thompson came in looking very grim. I have to show you something. And she looked for the paper and he said, it's on the computer. So she got up and went over with him, and on the computer was a picture of Amelia and only her bra and underwear, posing very seductively and suggestively to the camera, with people commenting very vulgar, crude things on the Birds of a Feather website. Kate lost it. I mean, her daughter, her young 15-year-old daughter, posing half naked for millions of people to see. That post had over 1,000 likes, almost 2,000 likes. She can't imagine how many people saw her young 15-year-old daughter in that position. Detective Thompson looked devastated for her as well. She didn't understand, one, how her daughter could do something like that, but two, how could she not know? I mean, she was her mom. How did she not know that her daughter was doing things like this? She didn't understand. Was she doing it? What is this for money? Is this just for the likes? Kate had no idea. So Detective Thompson left and Kate was honestly distraught. She didn't even notice that there was a loud banging on her window and she jolted up. It was Seth. He looked pissed off. She opened the door and he stormed inside and he said, "Do you know how many times I've called you?" And she cringed because honestly, she didn't even notice if anyone had called her. And he said, 12 times. 12 times I have left you messages. Oh my goodness, I was so worried that I made Thomas, who was Seth's husband, by the way, go pick up Lola because I had to intrude on his workaholicness, and now he's mad at me because I really thought I would come over here and you'd be dead or something. How dare you? How dare you not answer my phone calls? I was so angry. And in the middle of his speech, she just breaks down. Kate starts sobbing so much and Seth immediately softens and goes over and gives her a hug and he says, "Oh no, it's okay, sweetie, don't worry. Thomas, you know what? Lola's Thomas's daughters too. How dare he be mad at me? He needs to get off his work and go take care of his daughter too. It's okay." And he gives her the biggest hug and it was very, very sweet. You know, Kate fills him in on what's going on and he comforts her. I'm so sorry for the pause, guys. Look at how these bookmarks are coming. I've been doing all of these as I've been talking. I'm not done yet, but I have been really going through these because these were all blank when I started. It also started raining, which just adds to our comfy, cozy vibe. So, it adds to our comfy, cozy vibe. So if you hear ruckus in the background, it is raining. So it's not just fuzzy audio, I promise. Also, I'm in the little house where the rain does sound harder here, so. But sorry for the break. We can continue on with the story. The next chapter is Amelia's texts. So first she's texting Dylan. Dylan texts her, "Hey, are you free tomorrow?" And Amelia responds yes. And she says, "Okay, well, can we hang out, movie and dinner?" And Amelia says, "Sure, like a date?" And Dylan says, "Yeah. Okay, great, I'll see you tomorrow." Then she's texting Ben and she asks him, "Hey, when did you come out to your parents as gay?" He says, "Right away. My parents took it pretty well. My dad took a little more time, but my mom was really cool right away." And Amelia says, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too." And he says, "You should tell your mom." And she says, "Yeah, I know. I'm still on the fence on it. I know she would be supportive, but..." Then we see a text message between her and Sylvia where Sylvia says, "Hey, have you read Gracefully's last post? They said that Ian has wandering eyes. WTF." Amelia does what her supposed job is, which is comfort Sylvia. She says, "Of course not. He would never do that. They're just crazy," which instantly makes Sylvia feel better. The chapter ends. Next chapter is in Amelia's perspective, and she is waking up from a nap on her bed, and she wakes up. It is implied that her and Dylan, instead of going to watch a movie, they had had sex for the first time, and Dylan is standing in her bra and pants. She's pulling up her pants and looking at all of Amelia's bookcases and books, and she's just noting how, wow, she reads a lot. Amelia didn't want Dylan to think she was uncool, so she immediately says, "Oh, I haven't read all of them. Some of them I just have for show," which is a lie. And Dylan tells her, "You know, it's okay if you like to read books. I don't get it, but that's not a bad thing." Dylan keeps looking at her books. Amelia works up the courage to ask her, "Am I the only girl you've ever been with? Or am I the first girl you've ever been with? What does it matter? You're the one I'm with now." Amelia asks her, "Am I with you?" Because before she had tried asking Dylan off book. This wasn't included in the book. It just implied in what she said that in the past when she's trying to ask Dylan what they were, it had not ended well. And so she was trying to tread very carefully with her words because she didn't want to scare Dylan off because she really liked her, but she wanted to know if they were an item or not. So Dylan came over and said, "Of course we're together. I just don't want to publicize it. I don't want all of Grace Hall knowing my personal life. It's none of their business. We have nothing to prove to anyone." Amelia smiled and said, "Okay, you're right. Sorry." Dylan put an arm around her and said, "Look, I have to go. My mom's doing this big episode thing and she needs me to come home." That was what she said every time. Always after they had sex, she would find some excuse to just leave. Usually her mom. She would space out, almost sounded like robotic, but this time Dylan came over, put her arm around her and said, "That's okay, I have to go, but you're just needy." Most of the times, I think it's cute. It cuts to Amelia hanging out with Sylvia, and Sylvia's freaking out. She keeps saying, "Have you read Gracefully?" It keeps saying that Ian's not being faithful, that he's with other people, and Amelia's doing her best to ease her concern. She keeps telling her, "Look, that stuff is fake anyway, you know that." And she says, "Well, not all of it is not true. I mean, unfortunately, there are a lot of things in there that are true about me that I'd rather not be publicized out there." but they are true. Amelia keeps assuring her it's not true, and then her phone starts dinging. Sylvia asks her, who's texting you? Is this that weird fake gay Ben kid? Sylvia's convinced that Ben is not gay and that he's just saying that to try to get into Amelia's pants. I'm so sorry the rain has gotten so much louder. And Amelia kind of gets annoyed and she says no and lies and says, actually, it's my mom. And Sylvia comments very rudely, your mom? Oh my gosh, she's gonna win Mother of the Year if she finally has time for you, even a second, in the middle of the workday? This pisses Amelia off. She says, you know what? Just stop. And she gets up and she leaves. The text was actually from Zadie, and it told her that she needed to head home. So when she's heading home, she runs into Ian Green on her street. He's holding a camera. They're awkwardly exchanging pleasantries, and she finally tells him, look, I have to go. I'm actually late for meeting someone. He looks at her and says, I think that someone is me. And he holds the camera up and shows it to her. He tells her, look, I'm not a fan of this either. We should probably just not do this. I mean, maybe Sylvia's right. Maybe this club thing is dumb. Amelia agreed with him, but then she realized if she didn't do this, she would get kicked out. And things were already so rocky between her and Dylan. She couldn't read her emotions, and getting kicked out of Magpies would mean that she wouldn't be able to be with her anymore. Even though Dylan kept hurting her, she made her feel so happy at times too. So she just told Ian, no, it's fine. Let's do this. And she walked into the house. And that is who Kelsey saw her walking into the house in the middle of the day with Ian Green. And they get upstairs, she goes to her room, and they're sitting there and they're uncomfortable. It's so awkward, she doesn't know what to do. Ian's about to back out. He tells her, look, let's just not do this, it's fine. And then Amelia tells him, Ian, I'm gay. Okay, it's not gonna mean anything. Sylvia won't even mind, because Ian was concerned about Sylvia, and she said, Sylvia won't even mind. Look, she doesn't know I'm gay, so don't tell her, but when she knows, it'll be fine. Amelia knows she's lying, but Ian doesn't, so he believes her. And they take the pictures that are posted on Birds of a Feather that Kate had seen with Detective Thompson. Next, we get some of Amelia's text again. So she's texting Ben saying, hey, how are you? And Ben is not happy. He says, oh, so this is what you do? You get a girlfriend now and just ditch your friends? Don't talk to me? He apologizes. They make up. Next is more text to Ben. He asks her, hey, have you told Sylvia? And she says, not yet, I'm going to, I promise. And he says, okay, what about your mom? She says, not yet, she's super busy. And he tells her, look, you really should tell someone. You really should. And she says, I know, okay. Then we get a chapter in Kate's perspective. I'm sorry, the rain has gotten so crazy. It's like a big storm, but we will continue forward. We get the next chapter in Kate's perspective. This is when we find out an inkling that her history with Daniel Moore is that she slept with him. He's emailing her, hey, you missed a great party last night. It was a great function. You should have come. When are you coming to the next one? And then things get confirmed in the next chapter. Kate is going through more of Amelia's texts and stuff. She's made good progress. She has learned a lot about her relationship with Sylvia. She has learned a lot about her relationship with this boy named Ben, who's very sweet. She can't even help but be in little love with Ben. He's so kind. And then she notices how different her texts are with this boy named Dylan. Now, Kate assumes that Dylan is a boy, but we know that Dylan is actually a girl. Then she stumbles across what she was looking for, which is a very nasty text that says, your mommy is a homewrecker and your daddy is a whore. She takes this to Detective Thompson and shows him this and says, look, this is what I found. She had also previously found an email from Philip Woodhouse saying, Amelia, I'm so sorry that I scared you, but think about your future and your career and everything. Kate assumes that this email is him being sexually inappropriate with her. She's not 100% sure, but she finds this email and she's very angry. That was actually in reference to when he accidentally scared her when she was on her way to Zadie's house. Kate doesn't know this at this point, so she assumes that Philip Woodhouse is not a good person. So they go to the school. They get in to talk to Mrs. Pearl, the same woman who had called Kate while she was in the beginning when she was on the meeting with Victor to tell her that Amelia had been suspended, the dean of students. She's polite, but also very snappy and rude. When they were speaking to Mrs. Pearl, she mentions the suicide benefit that Adele Goodwin had wanted to put on for Amelia, that Kate had specifically said, no, I don't want. She got a little angry and said, what? I said no. Mrs. Pearl just waved her hands in front of her and was like, look, I'm not responsible for any of this. Don't get mad at me. I had nothing to do with this. Okay, if you have a problem, take it up with PTA. And she ushered them out to Liv's office, the Professor Liv. While they were waiting for Liv, because she was taking a little bit of time, Detective Thompson asked Kate, are you familiar with Zadie? And she said, Zadie, yeah, that name sounds familiar from Amelia. He said, well, her stepdad, his name is Frank Carmen. Carmen? You remember Detective Molina? Well, he had gone to work for a big security company, a corporation, that was named Carmen Industries. C-A-R-M-O-N Industries. Kate couldn't believe it. She asked him, are you serious? And he said, yes. Coincidence? I don't think so. Zadie's mom, her name was Adele Goodwin. She is a lawyer. And Kate paused him. Adele Goodwin, she was the woman who came to my house wanting to organize a suicide benefit, suicide fundraiser awareness event for Amelia. And I told her no. She's also Zadie's mother and married to Frank Carmen, the guy who Detective Molina went to go work for now. She was trying to process this when Professor Liv finally came out and said, you guys can come on in. So they asked the professor about the essay that supposedly Amelia had plagiarized. She explains that, look, it was so crazy. It's not just one sentence, like the whole thing was plagiarized. And I begged Amelia, I begged her, tell me what's going on. And she gave me no explanation for it. And so I had to write her up. That could have lost my job. Kate asks her, okay, did you actually see her hand the paper into you? And Liv explains that no, that they actually submit their work electronically, and then her assistant, her teacher's assistant, will print them out and give them to her. And she asked her, oh, what's your assistant's name? And she says, Bethany. Kate doesn't know this, but obviously we know Bethany is one of the magpies. She is under the thumb of all of them, so she easily could have switched out an essay for an essay. They ask her about the notes, all the I hate you, the 21 notes. And Liv is thrown back. She says, look, I'm not sure. Detective Thompson asked her, are you aware of any club, of any girls or that are meeting and, you know, causing trouble or anything like that? And Liv instantly gets defensive. She says, look, if you want to talk to Bethany, I have to ask Mrs. Pearl if you have any questions about that. I'm sorry. The school has so many restrictions on what I can and cannot talk about. I'm really sorry. Kate gets upset. She says, what, my daughter is dead. You're telling me that you can't tell me information because of what? The school policy? What school policy? Who are you protecting? They don't get anything else out of that meeting, but as Kate is standing up, she asks her, I'm sorry, I have another question. Dylan is a boy that my daughter was dating. Do you know if they were dating? And Liv looks uncomfortable and looks at her and says, I don't know if dating is the right term. And obviously I didn't hear any of this from Amelia, but from my understanding, maybe they weren't dating, but they definitely were involved, insinuating that they were a friends with benefits type of situation, not actually together, but she did say at the end, but Mrs. Barron, Dylan is not a boy, she's a girl. The story goes into a couple of texts from Amelia that are very, very pertinent to the story. So first is from Dylan. Dylan is texting her, hey, I'm bored and I'm in a bad mood. And Amelia says, oh no, well, can I see you tomorrow? And she says, yeah, we should do something fun. And they set up plans to meet the next day. Then she gets text from Ben asking her how she's doing, checking up on her, telling her that she should again tell someone what's going on. She says, yeah. And she says, hey, how come you said you were gonna come to New York City? Like, come on, I wanna see you. And he says, yeah, I'm working on it. She says, okay, well, hurry up. Then she gets text from Sylvia saying she's a effing magpie. And she says, who is? Kind of panicking. She said, the girl that Ian's been screwing. She's a magpie. Can you believe this? Then it goes to Amelia. She is with Sylvia in the library and they're just chit-chatting and they see Ian. And they both of them duck behind a bookshelf and they see Ian with another girl. They can't see if he's fully doing anything and Sylvia's trying, but Mr. Woodhouse interrupts them. So Sylvia's trying to look over to see what's going on. Mr. Woodhouse interrupts them. He finally leaves. Sylvia tries to look and they're gone. Ian and the girl are gone. She's like, oh, Woodhouse ruining everything. Dylan texted her during school, Amelia during school, and said, hey, can we hang out? Amelia said, yeah, you can come to my house. They had sex at her house and were laying still on the couch just with a blanket draped over them. And Dylan said, I love that your mom's never home. My mom's always home. She's always hovering. Amelia didn't really know how to answer that because she didn't always love it that her mom wasn't home. She missed her mom and wanted her to be home too. But for Dylan's sake, she said, yeah, I guess it's kind of cool, you know. And they were just chit-chatting and talking. And then the front door opened. Zadie walks in holding her phone, recording them both, being very careful not to record Dylan's face, but was recording both of them. Amelia was naked. She stood up to protect Dylan and was covering her and told her to get the F out of her house. And Zadie just started laughing hysterically and said, "Oh, look at you, look at you." When she turned around, she was so mad, trying to get Zadie out of her house, and Dylan was calmly putting her clothes on. And she said, "Go away, leave me and Dylan alone." And Zadie looked at her and she said, "You think Dylan actually likes you?" She said, "Dylan, come." And Dylan walked over with a blank look on her face. And Amelia was confused. She said, "Dylan, what are you..." She just didn't make eye contact with her, and she said, "Your girlfriend, she's on my side, not yours, and you're done." And she walked out, Dylan right beside her, and just left her there with a video of Amelia naked, you know, with another girl, and Amelia was crushed. She put her clothes on very quickly, and she ran back to school, desperate to find Dylan, but she had to go to class. And she was sitting in Miss Liv's class, and Miss Liv could tell something was off. She asked her, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm sorry, I think I got my period. Can I go?" Then it pans to Amelia being in Mr. Woodhouse's office, and he's telling her, "I just want to congratulate you." And she says, "I'm sorry?" And he says, you won the contest." The writing piece that the Professor Liv had submitted on behalf of Amelia won. She won the contest, and that was a huge deal. She's the first person ever from Grace Hall to win something like that. She was excited, but at the same time, it was hard for her to be excited, because he then said, "One of the contingents about you winning this is they're asking me to write a recommendation for you. But I can't do that in good faith and do that unless I know you're out of that club." And Amelia's shocked. She says, "You're blackmailing me?" And he says, "No, I just want you to know that. Don't let these girls be the reason why your future is not a future anymore. Don't let them cost you your future." And she says, "Oh yeah, so sure, I'll tell you, and then everyone's gonna hate me that I outed them, right? Is that it?" He says, "No one will ever find out, I promise." And she says, "Sure. Can I go now?" He says, "Yeah, Amelia, you can go." The next chapter is a gracefully post. It basically says that Dylan Crosby is now in love. Then the next chapter is a flashback in Kate's perspective about a boy named Rowan. So Rowan is actually a guy that she met and had a wonderful night with. She met him in a bar, but then he was going off to Ghana to teach children. And she had such a wonderful time, and they didn't sleep together, but they kept in contact for a bit. She would email him, he emailed her, and it was really lovely. And then she found out she was pregnant. When she found out she was pregnant, she emailed him and said, "I'm sorry, I just need time." And their communication ended, but she still thinks about it from time to time. His story is the story she told Amelia about who her dad was, because in reality, Kate had told Detective Thompson too, her dad is Daniel Moore. Daniel Moore. Can you believe that? That guy was so rude, and that's who her dad is. She told him that, and she said, "Look, he has no idea, but I was kind of in a friends with benefits things with him. Honestly, I didn't even like him. I never liked him. I don't know." That's where and it made so much sense. That's why she had told Amelia, "Look, I'm not perfect." When Amelia had asked her and gotten mad about her dad, she said, "Mom, really? Some guy in a bar? That's not you." And Kate said, "Look, Amelia, I'm not perfect." That's what she was insinuating. No, she hadn't met a guy in a bar and slept with him at a one-night stand. But she had met a guy in a bar. She didn't sleep with him, but she wished he was her dad instead of Daniel Moore, who she really regrets sleeping with. Then it pans back to Kate in present time in third person. Kate is dumbfounded. She was gay. Amelia was gay, and she didn't tell her. That was what was eating her up most, that Amelia didn't tell her. So she texted Seth and said Amelia was gay. He immediately called her and said Amelia was gay, and she explained to her what happened, and they were both silent for a bit. "Why didn't she tell me?" Seth just sighed and said, "Look, my parents are wonderful people, but even I took a long time to tell them I was gay. Most of the time, I wasn't even ready to admit it to myself." Seth was comforting. He told her, "Look, Lola is only 5, and 95% of the time I feel like I'm messing up, and she's 5 years old. Like, it's okay. You did your best." And then he said one of the most sweetest things, and he just said to her on the phone, "You were a good mother. You loved your daughter. She loved you. This isn't your fault." After she's done talking with Seth, she gets a phone call when she's back home, and it is from Philip Woodhouse. So remember, she had found that email about him? So she was not very happy with him. And also, when she had gone to the school to talk to Liv, they also wanted to talk to Philip Woodhouse, but apparently he was not there. He was in some conference somewhere. "I understand Mrs. Pearl said you wanted to speak to me." He seems a little nervous afterwards and asked her, "I just wanted to make sure you got everything you need." And Kate lashes out. She said, let's see. My daughter was apparently part of the secret club, and Grace Hall knew about it, had her posting half-naked pictures online that then turned into hate mail. They were bullying her. You guys all knew about it and didn't do anything. And even now, after the fact, after she's already dead, you still won't say anything. You guys are all just trying to keep this a big secret instead of helping. She exploded on him, and he told her, like, look, I'm sorry, my job prohibits me from releasing certain information. I can't imagine how you feel, and I'm so sorry. I know you're upset. And she says, upset? My daughter is dead. You have no idea what it feels like to have someone that you love be dead. She goes off on this man. And then she brings up the relationship thing and says, oh, I don't care if your contract is prohibiting you from speaking. I'm sure it would also prohibit you from having a relationship with one of your students. And he says, relationship? And he basically he tries to clear the air. Kate wasn't as receptive. He told her that, look, Amelia was an extraordinary girl. She had a bright future, and he was trying to help her, not have a relationship with her. And Kate ends the call by threatening him. She tells him, I am part of a big law firm, and you have 24 hours to get that information that I need, that everything that you know about, or I kid you not, bad things will happen. That was basically it. And she slammed the phone and hung up. Philip Woodhouse was not the person who I think needed that outburst to. But I'm happy Kate got that. You know, she's been going through it, one thing after another. I would have yelled at Professor Liv because she knew what was going on and said nothing too, right? And she supposedly, like, was closer to Amelia. I don't know. This whole thing is wild. But Kate was done. And after I honestly put the book down and was like, go off, pop off, queen. Because someone needed to get a stern talking to, because she's been running around trying to piece all these things together. And these grown adults are being so unhelpful. I know this isn't, I'm just supposed to be retelling the story, but I had to include this here because it is so frustrating seeing all these grown adults just not do or say anything. I mean, Philip Woodhouse was doing what he could on the side, but all these other people were just going on pretending it's nothing. Like, these kids are in your care, do something, you know what I mean? Anyway, we will move on. After she got off the phone with Woodhouse, she got a call from Jeremy. He seemed a little upset, not with her, just seemed a little down. And he said, look, I have something to talk to you about. Can you come? She said, look, I'm in the middle of something, but yeah, I can come. And he said, no, not to the office. It's personal. I need you to meet me at a restaurant. Then she went with Detective Thompson to Dylan's house after knowing that Dylan was actually a girl and the person that Amelia was irrevocably in love with. Kate had actually sorted through all the messages and read every single text message between Amelia and Dylan. She knew her daughter was hopelessly in love with this girl, and it broke her heart because Dylan broke her heart multiple times. She was about to lay eyes on the girl that broke her daughter's heart before she left this world. When they knocked on the door, this very charismatic woman opened the door. It looked like fake charismatic, I'll be honest. She introduced herself as Celeste and Dylan's mother. She walked inside, called Dylan, and Dylan came out. Kate couldn't stop looking at her. She just kept looking at this girl who had taken her daughter's virginity, who had been her daughter's first love and only love, and she knew she held so many answers. They looked at Celeste and asked if she could leave. The detective, assuming that the mom didn't know about any of this, and Celeste calmly said, my daughter and I don't have secrets from each other. I even know about the pictures. As soon as she said that, Kate looked at her and said, you knew? You knew and didn't do anything? And Celeste just said, look, I give her freedom. I'm not hovering all the time. I give her freedom to not only make good choices, but also bad ones. And she learns some and does better. She knew about the club. She knew about everything. And so they brought up the club to Dylan and asked her about everything and her involvement. And she just quietly just said, no one said no. No one ever said no to Zadie. Kate was just confused and said, why did, almost asking why her? Dylan looked up to her and said, well, Zadie only asked Amelia into the club because of you. Then it flashes to Detective Thompson and Kate leaving the house. Kate is reeling. She was confused. She didn't understand what she was talking about. And Detective Thompson gets annoyed. He turns around and he looks straight at Kate and says, you need to tell me right now, what is she talking about? What do you have to do with any of this? You're keeping something from me. She was like, no, I'm not keeping anything. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what she means. I'm trying to figure it out myself. And he said, look, you can't play any games with me, okay? I'm on your side. I want to help you, but no. Just, you have to be honest. And that was the first time she'd ever seen him kind of get upset. Kate was honest with him. She said, look, I've never even met that girl. And he said, but you have met her mother. You said she came by to your house. And she said, yes, I have met her mother. She came back to the house on behalf of the PTA wanting a suicide benefit for Amelia. And I told her no. But that was months after. I met her mother months after they had asked Amelia to be part of that club. And he says, well, it has to be something else then. She says, well, I don't know what it is. And he says, Okay, Kate goes on. She gets a phone call from her dad who, you know, is checking up on her. And it was the most emotion she has gotten out of him in a long time. And he tells her that her mom had actually cried and cares about her a lot. It seems like he was trying to repair something because she hadn't spoken to her mother since she told her to F off on the phone. And then she sets up for the meeting with Jeremy. He had called saying he needed to talk to her. So she heads to the restaurant and he's there. He says, look, I just want to apologize for what happened. It was inappropriate of me to have that relationship with you. And this is when we find out apparently Kate and Jeremy, who is married, who has been married since they met, and 2 kids, had an affair. A one-night stand. They slept together. Kate felt awful about it ever since, but she said, look, that happened forever ago. This is why you called me now to apologize for this? Like, just stop. I'm in the middle of so much. And he says, no, it just... And he pulls out a piece of paper and gives it to her. She doesn't open it. She says, I have to go. And he says, wait, this is an article from thelaw.com. It doesn't name you by name, but it's very graphic and everyone's gonna put pieces together. Kate's stomach drops. She says, what about Vera? Like, she doesn't know. And he says, she doesn't know yet. Vera's his wife, but she will. I just wanted to tell you it's not your fault and I'm sorry. And she just says, Jeremy, I never ever want to speak about this with you again. Do you understand me? And he says, yeah. She says, good. And then she gets up and leaves. And as she's walking out the door, she gets a text that says, what else is he going to give you this time? Implying that Jeremy gives her favors. Now we're back to Amelia's perspective. She has been going through it. I mean, Dylan is ignoring her, won't talk to her at all. She's just dealing with this alone. No one but Ben knows, but Ben, obviously, she can't talk to him. I mean, he checks up on her, but she has been getting bombarded with blocked number texts, just slurs of curse words at her, calling her a slut, calling her a whore, calling her disgusting, a lot of very vulgar words just being thrown at her, and she's stuck. It's gotten to the point where it's some serious bullying. She's getting, her locker is getting attacked with other slurs, and what's worse is the whole time Amelia's so sad about that, but she's not as sad as that, as the fact that Dylan won't talk to her. She's been apologizing to Dylan, sending her text saying, I'm sorry, as if it's her fault, when Dylan, what it seems like is that Zadie told Dylan to do that and that she never really cared about her at all. And she just walked out, let Zadie, her best friend, supposedly Dylan's best friend, take a video of her while she's naked, walked out. Instead of staying and defending Amelia, Dylan just walked out with Zadie. Is talking to Zadie, nothing's wrong, ignoring Amelia, and Amelia is still apologizing. It is the most heartbreaking part of the book that Amelia, the whole time, she should be mad with Dylan. She even tells herself, I should be mad, but all I want her to do is forgive me. Forgive you for what? Forgive you for what? It is so sad. So the story continues. Amelia is getting to the point where she's ready to tell someone, and I think the Magpies know that because they sent her a text in the middle of the night saying, if you tell anyone about anything, Sylvia will pay. The amount of content and stuff we have about her will ruin her, and we'll broadcast it to everyone. And Amelia, she could take it, but she knew in her heart Sylvia couldn't. She would crumble under the pressure. And she had already felt like she'd been such a terrible friend to Sylvia, lying and everything. And she said, okay, I can't say anything. Because she was close to. She was about to spill and let go. And she didn't. She doesn't want Sylvia to get bullied as well. So she decides to keep things to herself until she sees Dylan whispering with other people, laughing, and all the stuff that was going on in school. So she comes home, she decides, okay, I have to tell my mom. But she didn't even know where to start. She comes down and she sees her mom rushing, and she knows. And her mom is telling her, look, I'm really sorry. I have to work really late tonight. Just you get yourself food. And she's rushing around. And Amelia is so overwhelmed, just says, Mom, I want to spend the next summer abroad. I want to go to Paris. And we know now this is because of all the bullying she's getting. She thought maybe she could just go away. She would get a second of peace. And her mom says, what? Paris? And that's when their whole fight ensues. The one that Kate was thinking about in the beginning about Paris and how she screamed, yes, just say yes, Mom. So afterwards, Amelia goes to school and she decides to tell Sylvia everything. Started off with, Sylvia, you're gonna be mad at me. I did something really stupid. And she was right. Sylvia was shocked, upset, but she even was able to come out to Sylvia. And it was so liberating for her. As mad as Sylvia was, she was also very understanding. Amelia even asked her, can you please help me write an email? I'm gonna write an email and send it to Dylan as like a last hoorah. And Sylvia said, absolutely. After school, I will come over. She felt so much better. Like, a huge weight was lifted off her shoulders. She was so happy that she had finally told someone, you know? Sylvia texts her, I'm gonna be coming over to write your lesbo love letter. Amelia says, okay, great. And so she comes over and they write the letter. Now we're back to Kate's perspective. Kate gets a text message from Duncan, the IT guy from her firm. And he says, took me a while to crack this one. They were trying to be sneaky, doing a ton of things, but I found out who wrote Gracefully, specifically that blog that knew everything about everyone and would say those really vicious, rude, and vulgar things about all the students at Grace Hall, the professors and everything. I found out who she is. Her name is Liv Brighton, B-R-I-T-T-O-N, also known as Professor Liv, the professor, the English professor at Grace Hall. She is the one who's been writing Gracefully. This stunned me. I know I'm not supposed to include this in here, but oh my goodness, wild. Anyway, Kate is astounded. She's filled with so much anger because this professor sat there and told her how much she supposedly cared about Amelia and how much she loved her job and that she, all this stuff. And the whole time she knew exactly what was going on and didn't say anything. She knew what was going on around her. She knew what was happening to Amelia, the mental anguish she was going through, the people bullying her, and did absolutely nothing. And says she wrote about it in a blog to bully more people, just continuing this process. It was terrible, honestly terrible. And so she's super angry. She goes to the school, right, to confront Liv. She tells Detective Thompson and goes to the school. And with luck have it, she runs into Ian Green. So Kelsey, her neighbor, called her and said, look, I felt really, really bad about not telling you. So I did some digging and I found out what boy was with her in the middle of the day, was with Amelia. And she said, what's his name? And she said, Ian Green. I know him. I recognize him now. It was him. Now she knows Ian Green is the boy who was at her house in the middle of the day because her neighbor saw him. And so she confronts him about it. And at first he tries to deny it, but then she says, look, my neighbor saw you. Tell me what you were doing. He says, you mean... She says, look, I don't think you were having sex because, you know, she knows her daughter is a lesbian, so she doesn't think he was having sex. But what was she doing then? Drugs? Like, Kate just wanted to know. And he says, oh, look, I didn't want to do it, but Amelia insisted. And she said, insisted on what? And he said, taking the pictures. And Kate could not believe this. He had taken the pictures of her. He said, and Ian went on to say, look, we were both getting pressures from our clubs, and Amelia, she's the one who convinced me to do it. And honestly, I was really hesitant at first, but the pictures came out great, don't you think? And this boy went on to describe how they were beautiful and how Amelia was so fit, and he didn't have to be a girl to admire that she had such a beautiful body in front of Kate. And before Kate even knew what was going on, she had smacked him. She gave him a big smack, but also she was in a school and he's a minor. So yeah, that didn't go over well. But for one split second, I was like, pop off, queen. You should not smack kids though. That's not okay. But what type of person describes someone's child who is dead like that? I don't know. But anyway, she got in trouble, as she should. She shouldn't be smacking kids. Mrs. Pearl was livid. She said she assaulted a kid. Detective Thompson was standing there defending her. But then as soon as they left, he was furious at her too. He was like, what are you doing? You're not allowed to come to talk to Liv. I'm gonna talk to Liv. She said, no, I need to go. I have all this information. Philip Woodhouse, he had cracked. He had sent her a package with everything, documents of all the Grace Hall meetings, their understanding of it, everything. He exposed them all, everything he gave to her, and she was very appreciative about that. And she understood that no, he really was just looking out. There was no romantic relationship or anything. She, you know, understood that part. And so she wanted to be the one to go in and to talk to Liv and look her in the face and ask her what the heck, right? But because she had smacked a kid, she wasn't allowed on the school anymore. And so Detective Thompson went to do it without her. He came back and he told her she cracked under the pressure. Liv's great excuse was that she didn't mean to hurt anyone. She was just trying to get closer to the kids. Kate was furious. She said that's her excuse. Detective Thompson said, look, it's not my excuse. I'm just telling you what she said. Honestly, her having to live with that is punishment enough. Live with the fact that she could have done something and didn't, and now someone's dead. Then we're back to Amelia's perspective. So it is the morning. Remember, Kate, after their big Paris fight, the next day Amelia skipped down and was super happy and just said bye and pretended nothing was going on. She was wearing her black flat-heeled booties and she walked out the door and her mom called after, hey, goodbye. I was in her head, Kate was preparing herself for a big fight. Amelia was like, oh, bye. It's okay. I don't need to go to Paris anymore. We're good, right? Because she had told Sylvia this weight was lifted off her shoulder. It's okay if the rest of the school hated her. She had survived so long with just her and Sylvia, and it was them against the world. Somewhere along the way had forgotten that was enough, more than enough. And so she skipped down to go meet Sylvia. Her and Sylvia had written the email. Sylvia did a great job of being kind of snarky and, you know, saying what she needed to, defending Amelia. But then after Sylvia had left, Amelia added a few extra lines to it, professing her love to Dylan, telling her to please take her back, and she sent the email. She just was so in love, so in love with Dylan, and honestly just wanted to be with her again. She wanted Dylan back. So she went to meet Sylvia, and when they got to school, it was bad. Everyone was staring at her and laughing. The email she had sent to Dylan got sent to every single kid at that school. Everyone was reading it and laughing at her. She had really poured her heart and soul into that. That was not something that was ever meant to be public. Everyone at Grace Hall had read it. Amelia was mortified. Sylvia was her rock. She told people to F off, to get away from her. She took it to the nurse and was like, it's an emergency. And the nurse was like, you're not even sick, get out. She was like, look, my friend needs a place to sit. Okay, she was just being a rock star friend, doing what she needed to do, protecting her friends, swatting all the haters away. I mean, Amelia was shredded. She was so sad. And the worst part was that she still, even after all this, just wanted Dylan to come talk to her. She texted Ben and just said, please, are you coming? Please, I really need to see you. Everything's falling apart. And he's like, I'm trying to come to New York. I'm trying, I promise. Now we're back to Kate's perspective. Kate had gotten information from Duncan of who Ben was, where he was. She didn't have an identity, but she had a location, and it was not in Albany. It was in Manhattan. The address of the text and everything was in Manhattan. An apartment building, and she was standing outside of it, and the apartment building was 6C. She managed to get her way in there by, you know, doing some sly things, and she was standing there. She had never been to this apartment before, and she knocked at the door and was shocked when Vera opened the door. Vera, Jeremy's wife. That apartment was Jeremy and Vera's apartment with their 2 sons. Too much was happening. She couldn't process. Vera looked at her and was just, oh, surprised to see her and kind and smiled. And that made Kate even feel more guilty because she had slept with her husband. Even if it happened forever ago, she had slept with her husband. Vera invited her in. And also, Kate didn't know, but did Vera know that Jeremy had cheated on her? Had she read the article? She had no idea where that was. She was trying to find a way to get out when Jeremy walked in and saw her in his apartment with his wife. And Vera made an excuse and said, oh, I have to go. Like, you guys talk. Jeremy told her, oh, she just needed me to sign some papers. But Kate knew that was a lie. Vera had to know that was a lie. She had nothing in her hand. But Vera just smiled and walked out. Jeremy then looked at her and said, what happened? Look, I think one of your sons was pretending to be this kid named Ben and talking to Amelia, and I was coming over here because this is where the address was, and she was explaining everything. And Jeremy just looked at her and said, it wasn't one of my sons. It was me. I'm Ben. Kate's world came crashing down. So many things were going on in her head. She went, what do you mean? You're disgusting. What? You were trying to get with my daughter, and then everything was flashing to her head. Was he a pervert, a pedophile? This is disgusting. She slept with this man? What was he even doing? Ben talked to her. They talked about very intimate things. Like, he was like her best friend besides Sylvia. What was happening? Jeremy quickly said, no, it's not like that. She's so great. I wanted to get closer to her. And she said, closer to her? You disgusting human being. You wanted to sleep with my 15-year-old daughter? Was livid. Okay, and he said, no, I didn't want to sleep to her. I wanted to get to know her. I know, Kate, I know. You know what? I know that she's mine. What? Kate just looked at him and said, she's not yours. In her head, she's saying, what is he talking about? She's Daniel's. I slept with him for multiple months, like a lot. I slept with you once. How the heck would she be your daughter? And he said, Waardenburg syndrome? That runs in my family. Look, I had suspicions because of the timing, but the timing works. And then once I found out she had Waardenburg, she's my daughter. The light hair, the streak, the different colored eyes, that runs in my family. It doesn't run in yours, does it? I've known for a long time. She's my daughter. Kate couldn't believe this. There's no way. There's no way. She was convinced. She had punished herself this whole time that Daniel was the father of her child, a man she literally despised, but she had to deal with him because even though he had no idea, she thought this is the father of my kid. And now Jeremy's saying he's the father? This whole time he was the dad? I was trying to help her. I was really trying to help her, and Kate couldn't believe this. She said, wait a minute. Then it finally hit her. You knew this whole time, everything that was going on. I mean, she had read all the texts between Amelia and Ben. She told him everything. Jeremy knew, this grown man knew what was going on in her daughter's life, how much she was suffering, and no one told her. No one said anything. Jeremy told her, look, I'm sorry. Daniel's the one that spilled about the lawyer post article about them two. Jeremy kept apologizing. He said, look, I didn't even know about you two. I'm so sorry. Kate couldn't. She just said, I can't do this. I can't. And he said, look, and they had gotten so loud that Jeremy's kids came out to check to see what was going on, and Kate couldn't handle this. She left and she went to go find Detective Thompson. I'm sorry. That's the first words Kate said to Detective Thompson when she was with him. I'm sorry I went there. She expressed everything to him, and he looked at her with so much sympathy and said, look, it's okay. We need to go talk to Zadie. They went to go talk to Zadie because it seemed like she was a major part of this. Last thing he knew, I mean, Dylan had admitted, and even Detective Thompson said, there's no way Dylan just said that and it wasn't true. That's just too random of a fact. That Zadie only invited Amelia into that club because of Kate. It's too random of a fact. So they went to Zadie's house. They go in there. Her stepfather, Frank Carmon, is there, and Adele is there. And this time, Adele is not that sweet, smiley girl that had come seen Kate. No, she's on edge. Her lawyer face is up. She knows that her daughter is involved in something. She calls her down, and Zadie just looks annoyed. Like she doesn't want to talk to them, but at the same time isn't hiding anything. She just looks annoyed at the world. Every single person in that room is annoying her. She just says, look, I wasn't on the roof the day Amelia died, okay? I was here with this boy named Ian Green. Do you know him? He can vouch for me. Frank then goes to say, yeah, we have security tapes. You can tape them. You can see she was here. She had nothing to do with this. Detective talks about the club and how Zadie's the ringleader. This whole thing spirals out of control. Zadie even goes on to say, look, my mom, she's trash. She's only with my stepdad for his money. Adele instantly says, you're such a liar, Frank. Don't listen to them. And he says, sure, Adele. Starts pouring shots, okay? He's drinking in the corner. They're all having an argument. And then finally, Zadie admits what we've been waiting for. This whole thing. I got close to Amelia because my mom said so, because she wanted to get back at her for something. The story starts unfolding and Adele turns vicious. Zadie keeps going off about how she wasn't on the roof, and Kate's starting to zone out. She's looking around the room and something just feels off, and her eyes land on a picture. It was a picture of Jeremy. She had seen that picture in his office before, but she had never seen the woman handing him the award. It was Adele Goodwin, and she looks over at Zadie with a white streak in her hair and looks over at Adele, who's saying, oh, she couldn't have possibly done it. She just goes, she has Waardenburg syndrome too, doesn't she? And Adele looks at her and says, you know, you were a pretty good liar. I went over to your house after Melina told me that the text that you had gotten. I wanted to see what you were going to do about it. And when I asked you about the Waardenburg syndrome, you really had me believing, I knew you were lying, that Amelia didn't have any family history of Waardenburg syndrome in her family. And Kate snapped at her. I am Amelia's family. I am her family. And there's no Waardenburg syndrome in her family. Adele just looks at her and laughs and says, I guess that's why Jeremy protects you and has you around, because of how much you protect him. He must love the way you cover for him. Me? He wanted nothing to do with me. But you he kept around, helped you with your career, even helped you find Grace Hall for Amelia. He told me he was going to leave Vera for me. Did you know that? He said that. But then he told me one day, no, that he couldn't possibly leave Vera. I thought he meant that. And I would have kept his secret too, you know, until I saw Amelia at the Harvest Festival. One thing led to another, and I wouldn't even put it together until Julia raved on about how her single mom and at this big lawyer. It's like one phone call to find out about you and Jeremy. It's not a well-kept secret, by the way. It was because of you. I would have had a future with him, but because of you, he left me. And then he had the audacity to put his other illegitimate daughter with my daughter, rubbing it in my nose. Someone had to hold Jeremy accountable for all the things he did. So I told Zadie, but how was I supposed to know it would get out of hand? Kate looks at her and says, did you tell Daniel about me and Jeremy too? And she says, oh my gosh, of course I did. Daniel and I were on the ethics bar committee together. I told him because he would always complain about Jeremy, and the weasel didn't do anything about it for months until finally he grew a pair and did something. She said, look, someone had to hold Jeremy accountable for all he did. I couldn't do anything else about it. He plays golf with my general counsel. If he wanted to end my career, he could have. So I needed to come up with another way. And Amelia, she was just collateral damage. I didn't know how far and how carried away Zadie and the club would get. How was I supposed to know that? I couldn't predict that. Detective Thompson and Kate sat in silence in the car after that. They were just trying to process everything that had just happened. Then Detective Thompson gets a phone call. He looks at Kate and says, we found out where those first texts came from, the ones that said Amelia didn't jump. And so they drive. And the address is an address that Kate knows all too well. They walk in and Sylvia's mother opens the door. They sit down and they ask for Sylvia. Comes down looking like a deer in the headlights. A very, very different demeanor than she had the first time they came. Like a scared little cat. Detective Thompson was not aggressive, but he was forceful. As forceful as Kate had ever seen him question anyone before. And he asked Sylvia, did you know that Amelia was a magpie? She just looked at them and squeaked out, do you know the stuff they did to her? I was scared that they would do that same stuff to me, so I didn't say anything. And Kate asked her, was it a magpie who pushed her? Did you see them push her off the roof? Sylvia shook her head and said, no, I didn't see anyone. Like I said, I wasn't there. Sylvia then said, I think it was Ben. You know, he was supposed to be visiting Amelia that day. Have you found him? And Detective Thompson says, we found him. It wasn't Ben. And she says, oh. Detective Thompson then asked her, do you know about Dylan? Why didn't you tell us about Dylan? Amelia was so in love with Dylan. She was like nutso trying to get her back. And it was so sad seeing her do that. And so Kate rose her voice a little and said, you knew all of this and you didn't think to tell an adult? And Sylvia's mother stepped in and said, hey, do not come after my daughter. It's not her responsibility to be Amelia's mother. It was yours. And that quieted Kate down. She had already carried that guilt. Sylvia went on to say, I think she joined that club because she was lonely, which broke Kate's heart even more. Maybe if you had been around more, she wouldn't have done that, starting to shift the blame over to Kate. And Detective Thompson stepped in and said, okay, look, Sylvia, I think you know more about this than you're letting on. Julia, Sylvia's mom, interrupted him and said, what are you talking about? What would Sylvia know about? Detective Thompson pulled out a piece of paper and gave it to Sylvia and her mom and said, we know you sent the text. We know you sent the text to Kate that Amelia didn't jump. Every time I would walk home, I would see you just in your house so sad. And I thought that if you knew that she hadn't jumped, that you would get better, that you would feel at least a little bit better. And so Julia just hugged her down and said, okay, well, that's okay. So you don't know anything. You just made that up to make her feel better, right? And Sylvia shook her head and said, no, I know she didn't jump. Now we are on to the last chapter in Amelia's perspective. So Amelia was in school, sitting in Mr. Woodhouse's office, annoyed because she didn't cheat and she didn't plagiarize. She was talking to Mr. Woodhouse and he was so close to spilling everything, to telling him everything that was going on, when Mrs. Pearl came in and said that there was a rat, huge ruckus going on in the cafeteria, and he needed to come immediately. And he looked at Amelia, and she was so close to telling him, but he got up and said, I'll be right back, and he left. Amelia looked down at her phone and saw that Sylvia had texted her, so she made a break for it. She met up with Sylvia, and Sylvia said, Ian broke up with me. She was so sad, and Amelia was comforting her, and she decided to take her on a little tour, sneaking around the school of their highlights. She took her to a couple of different spots. You know, the first time they decided to be friends, moments where they spent together, and it was honestly really, really sweet. Then they got up to the roof and they were just laughing there, you know, having a really good time between friends. As they were standing on the roof, Sylvia got a text. It was a picture of Amelia in her underwear, the one that had been posted on Birds of a Feather, and the caption and the text that followed with it said, look in the mirror. Amelia at first was like, ew, please put that away. And Sylvia was like, oh my gosh, is this some kinky thing you did with Dylan or something? What is wrong with you? And she was laughing, and then her laugh disappeared because she looked in the mirror and you could clearly see the outline of Ian Green taking the picture. She shoved the phone in her face and said, is this whole time, are you even gay? Are you anything? You were just trying to sleep with my boyfriend? How would you do this? And Amelia's trying to explain, no, you have to understand, Zadie set all of this up. It wasn't me. We didn't know. And she's trying to explain. Sylvia is just angry and she swung at her. And Amelia was standing very, very close to the edge. Sylvia looked at her, her face widened, and she tried to grab for her, and her nails scratched her arm. And Amelia just kept falling and falling. And her last thoughts were, I tried so hard to grab on, to hold on to her, but I couldn't. That was the last chapter of the book. The book then has an epilogue that's told in Kate's perspective. She is at Amelia's tombstone and she's just talking to her, telling her that it's getting warmer. She loves her so much and that she has gone out on a coffee date and a little bit of an outing with Mr. Woodhouse, and she was giggling because she doesn't know if Amelia would approve or not, but it was so nice spending time with someone who understood how much of an extraordinary human being her daughter was. She has no idea if it's going to go anywhere, but it was nice spending time with someone who really understood. At the end, she told her daughter that she's really sorry, but that the guy in the bar existed. He just didn't happen to be her dad, but she had hoped that at one point in her life he could have been. They never slept together. There was no chance that he would be her father, but she told her that Jeremy was a mistake, but that having her was never a mistake. Amelia, the life she shared with her, was never something she would ever regret. And she cherished those moments. Sorry that she never told her the truth about her dad. The author went on to tell us Kate is her mother, will always be her mother, and that she is now the keeper of all her secrets, the cherisher of her heart, and that her mother will always be. And that is the end of Reconstructing Amelia. Oh my gosh, guys. This book was a whirlwind. I'm sorry if my storytelling was choppy. It was so many details, so many plot twists. I did leave out a couple of interactions just because they made sense in the book, but in the telling of the story they didn't really have a place. I hope my storytelling gave it justice, and now we can head on to the book review and my thoughts. If there is one word that I would describe this book, it is tragic. A tragedy. I would absolutely recommend this book. It gets a solid 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. I think that some of the writing could have been done in a slightly different way, but overall the story and the premise of it was very compelling. The plot twists, I predicted some of them, but not all of them. I figured that Jeremy might be her dad. I had predicted that. There were a couple of things that threw me for a loop. It was in some parts very vulgar, so I feel uncomfortable saying that young teenagers should read this, but at the same time, in the world we live in, teens are exposed to so many more vulgar things than this book. Even like, for example, the sex scenes, they didn't go into depth. They never really said it. It was brushed over. It wasn't like a sexual book in nature by any means. It was just, let's meet up. And after they were putting their clothes on. So I feel comfortable with younger kids reading this book. And I think that the message, the take-home message, if I was in my middle teens, like 16, 17, 18, this book I think would have had a more impactful way of my life. I was able to reach the same conclusion without the book, just going through life. Would I recommend it to someone? Yeah, I would recommend this book to an avid reader. If you like to read a lot, if this is your first time reading, I would probably recommend other books before this one. However, if you're new into mystery, this is a great book to get started off. It's not too intense. The plot twists were predictable, but not crazy. I think if you're looking to get into mystery, I would recommend this book to people. It's a good intro to mystery. For me, my favorite character was Seth. I loved Seth. Anyone else agree? Seth was such a great character. He was so caring. Beatrice was another one. Just people who genuinely have such good souls. People who come out to help so selflessly too. I liked Kelsey for parts, but it did irk me that she didn't say anything. So Sylvia gets a very low rating on my scale. There are moments where I thought, wow, this is a good friend. She sticks with you, right? But even in the beginning, I got bad feelings from her. Even Amelia had admitted multiple times in the book, when Sylvia's hurt, she takes it out on Amelia. She says hurtful things to make herself feel better. Because at one point you could tell Sylvia was jealous of the relationship between Kate and Amelia, because even though they didn't see each other all the time, it was quality over quantity. The quality and the strong bond that Kate and Amelia had was so beautiful. When Amelia started pulling away and doing the club, that fractured a lot, but they could have built it back up again. And Sylvia, although her mom was there more often, she didn't have that. She detested her mom. Amelia multiple times said, yeah, Sylvia, for whatever reason, just kind of hates her mom. I'm not sure why. They didn't really go into it in the book, but that was very sad to see. Instead of being jealous for your friend, you know, be happy for them. The biggest takeaway from the book is these clubs, they're so toxic in so many ways. I'm not saying friend groups are toxic. It's just the idea that to be able to be friends with someone, you need to do things, you need to haze people. You have to post naked picture of yourself. You have to pull pranks. If not, you're going to be out. People should run away from that. You don't need that in your life. If you feel lonely, there are people you can reach out to and things you can do. You don't have to do this, because many young kids don't process your actions have consequences. There's no one person, there's no fault as to why Amelia died, right? It's so many people who shared the responsibility. It was her mom. It was Amelia's responsibility to stop lying. She started lying to, her world started to fall apart when she started weaving this huge web of lies. And when she finally started coming out with the truth, that's when she finally realized again and come back to herself and said, I don't need these people. I'm okay. Felt so much better. Sylvia accepted her again and she was good again. And the problem was that she took too long to say it. But also, that wasn't her fault. Why the heck did Sylvia attack her? That's your answer? You know, your violence on a roof? That was Sylvia's part too. You find out this from your best friend, you use your words. You don't go around smacking people. She smacked her and she fell to her death. That infuriated me so much. And then she had the audacity to say, I wish I'd never met her, when her mom was talking to her the first time. She's dead now and you're saying that? What is wrong with you? That was your best friend and you really, she killed her over a boy who has moved on to a different girl. And it wasn't even what she thought. Yes, Amelia did something wrong, but use your words, talk it out, stop jumping. Take a second to calm down. This is your best friend. You're really gonna go punch her? That was so frustrating to me. But again, she's young, but I think the biggest takeaway is if you find out someone did something terrible to you, your answer should not be to go up and smack them. You gotta cool off first. Use your words, you know? Let's use our words, especially your best friend, who just give her a chance to explain. And even then, you have absolutely have the right to be mad at her. I'm not saying Sylvia didn't have the right to be mad at Amelia. Amelia lied to her. She was naked or half naked in front of a guy she really liked. Absolutely, of course Sylvia should be mad. That's not a problem. But anger doesn't mean let me go smack him. She was just what? You know what I mean? That whole thing with Jeremy was so frustrating. I mean, this guy was a serial cheater. He gave me the heebie-jeebies. Him being Ben threw me off. I didn't think it was gonna be him. I thought, I don't know. I don't really know who I thought Ben was. I knew Ben wasn't who Ben said he was. Obviously, that was pretty obvious. It would have been more of a surprise if Ben actually was some kid from Albany. That would have been a plot twist, because we all were like, sure. The idea that loneliness is such a powerful drive as an introvert, which hopefully my channel is catered more towards introverts because I am an introvert. The introverts unite, you know? Introverts spend a lot of the time alone, right? But when you really come to terms with who you are and everything, you realize that even though we're alone a lot of the time, I think that introverts feel less lonely than a lot of extroverts who are surrounded with people, because it's not about the amount of people you're with. It's the connection you feel with the people you're with. So if I'm by myself and I don't feel connected to anyone, that's fine, because I know I have my mom I feel connected to, my sisters I feel connected to, versus being in a room full of people where I'm chatting everyone up and smiling but feeling so fake. I don't like doing that. I'd rather sit by myself and read a book. I feel so much better knowing that I'm choosing to do that instead of putting on a show for people. Amelia had lived her life that way. She was an introvert. She was with Sylvia, she had her book, she had her mom, and she had her little bubble, and she was comfortable. She would see all these people and be like, a part of me wishes I could do that, but it wasn't feasible at that time, so she didn't feel this overwhelming sense of loneliness. It was only until she got older, Sylvia started ditching for her boyfriends, her mom got more into work and was getting busier, Leela left. Leela was a huge support system for Amelia, and then this carrot is dangled in front of her to have a group of friends. The first time she was attracted to someone and wanted to be in a relationship with Dylan, a girl who she really fell in love with. It was just so much, and it was being dangled in front of her, and all in her mind, all she had to do was these simple little things that she could justify because she really wanted to be in this relationship. She wanted to feel like she wasn't lonely. You choose whether you feel lonely or not. I'm not saying that if you feel lonely, it's your fault. Absolutely not. But I'm saying is we are more than enough. If there's anything this book has reinforced for me is that you are more than enough for yourself. We can't sit around waiting for someone to make us feel welcome. We have to do that. You know, Amelia was more than enough for herself. You have to be there. We can't constantly wait for someone to pull us in, because sometimes the people that pull you in don't have your best intentions in mind. This book was so hard to read because it wasn't one choice that made her spiral. You could argue that her deciding to go to that meeting and join the Magpies is what led to her death, but that's not true. It was every step along the way. She had the choice to choose something different that would have altered whether she lived or died. Every person there could have done something that would have altered it. When she was trying to tell her mom and her mom took that call from Victor, she could have done something about it. When she decided not to tell her mom, like 5 different occasions where she decided not to tell her mom, where Jeremy decided not to say anything, the neighbor decided not to say anything, Philip Woodhouse decided not to say anything, thinking they could handle it on their own instead of telling someone. That was the biggest thing. Keeping things locked in and not telling someone when you're struggling, when you're seeing something unjust, when you're noticing that things are wrong. Every person had such a responsibility. I think there was a very important line in the book where Julia looked at Kate and said, "How dare you? It was your responsibility to be a mother, not my daughter." Yes, that's true. As a parent, it's your responsibility to keep your kids safe. But as a human being, you have a responsibility that if you see someone in pain, if you see someone struggling, especially if you see someone close to you, I understand that we can't save everyone. It's not your job to, you know, cure the world. If you want to do that, that's great, you know, good for you. But if you don't, that's also okay. But people who you have close to you, if you're a teacher, your responsibility is to help your kids. This English professor that just started writing nasty things on a blog, are you kidding me? You're a teacher. Your job is literally to help children. That is your job. And if you won't even stand up and speak out for a kid that you see that is suffering, who else is going to? If your best friend is struggling, if you're a grown man and you know that your daughter, who doesn't even know she's your daughter, is going through some terrible stuff, the least you could do is go tell her mother, who's been raising her for 15 years, instead of pretending to be some 15-year-old boy. Like, what? The writing was very good. I liked how it skipped between it. Sometimes I felt like, though, the Facebook posts didn't really make sense to me. Maybe 1 or 2 of them. The rest of them, I didn't really understand why they were in there. The gracefully posts, some of them were also, I understood that, like, that she was putting the clues in between the posts, so I understood that part. Sometimes I didn't even really want to read them. I was like, I don't even, this is just, I don't want to read these blog posts. For Kate's perspective, the chapters of Amelia were pretty thick and she put in the text messages and everything. So by the time I got to Kate again, I kind of had forgotten where Kate had left off, and I was like, wait, why is she with the detective here? And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. And so that made it a little difficult, and I read it all together. So I picked up the book, read it, and finished it that same day. I can't imagine someone who needed to take a couple of days. You probably would have forgotten everything. That is my only little criticism, but in terms of the writing and everything, I thought it was good. The story itself was very tragic. I would give this book a solid 7.5 out of 10. Will I reread it? Probably not. My personal rating scale, 5 out of 5 is New York City coffee. 4 out of 5 is Nespresso coffee, the Nespresso machine we love. Then French press coffee is 3, coffee pot is 2, instant coffee is 1, and colored water is 0. Out of this rating, I would give this book a solid 3 French press coffee. You know, it's good. It's a nice, you could read it at a little breakfast, maybe on a little vacation. This is a good, like, vacation read book. I would take this book on a vacation, which I did. I took it when I went to Boston and I read it in the car. It was great. Let me know what your thoughts are. Please, please. I love hearing people's thoughts. So as unfortunate as it is that you guys aren't here so I can listen to you and get your immediate feedback so we can discuss about the book, those are my thoughts. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments. Talk it out. No, remember, this is a loving space. It's okay if, let's say, maybe I talked about how I didn't like Sylvia. If someone out there really likes Sylvia and thinks she's great, that's okay. It's your opinion, babes. You write it down in the comments. I want to hear. Maybe you'll change my mind. That's what's so great about talking to someone about books, is you really get a nice perspective of everyone, and it's so cool. So put your things in the comments down below. If you write an essay in the comments, I will promise I will read it all. Come on, this is a book club. We love reading here. So make your comments nice and long if you want to. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to announce the next book of the month for September. So the September book of the month that I will be reviewing and summarizing in the first Monday of October. This is the book of the month. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day. and get reading, because you got 1 month to read this next book. Also, side note, these were all the bookmarks I managed to complete. Well, they're not fully done yet. I still have to add the letters to them and everything, but I have been filming for a while, but I was able to get these done. So thank you so much. This was so relaxing. I hope that while you're watching this, you also were doing something cool, like a puzzle or artwork. If you're just listening and wanted to lay in your bed, that's cool too. Whatever you wanted to do. But I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to the next one, and I will see you guys in October with another book talk. You are enough. You are more than enough. I promise. You're enough for yourself. Bye.